Let us pray. Almighty God, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor and blessings us, your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to leadership positions in this republic. We seek guidance to treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberations in so just and faithful a manner as to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our charge. Amen.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Okay, order. Okay, honorable senators, I have a communication to make. I would like to acknowledge the presence in the Speaker's Gallery this afternoon of a delegation from the Nyandarua County Youth Empowerment Forum. The delegation is in the Senate on a familiarization visit on the operations of Parliament, its committees, and specifically the legislative process. Honorable senators, on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, I welcome the delegation to the Senate and wish them well for the remainder of their visit. I thank you. Thank you. Senator Nderitu.
Kunipa fursa hii. Nataka kuchukua fursa hii kuungana nawe kuwakaribisha wenzetu hasa majirani wangu kutoka Nyandarua. Nawaambia karibuni, waje waone vile ambavyo mambo tunatekeleza hapa katika seneti. Na seneta wa Nyandarua Mheshimiwa Githiomi ni seneta mkakamavu anayepiga mijadala hapa kwa njia ya uwerendi, uadilifu, na ni mtu aliyejitolea kabisa. Na anasema maneno yalivyo bila kusitasita. Kwa hivyo ningependa kuungana nawe kuwaambia karibu na karibu sana waweze kuona vile ambavyo tuneneza mjadala katika seneti. Asante.
Senator Yusuf Haji.
Asante sana Bwana Spika, nasimama kukushukuru kwa kukaribisha wageni wetu. Mimi ninataka kueleza kwamba Bwana Spika, mimi nilipelekwa Nyandarua mwaka wa 1975 kama DC, na nimefanya hii jina yangu.
Mwaka gani? Mwaka gani maybe?
1975. Na Haji nimepata hiyo umaarufu kutoka kwa watu wa Nyandarua, watu wazuri sana, watu ambao tumesikizana. Na nakumbuka kila mara nikitaka kupelekwa transfer, wanakuwa wanamwambia mzee Muya, bana huyu tu atoke hapa kama atakuwa PC. Na misha nikawa PC kule Mombasa. Kwa hivyo hawa vijana wako hapa na wapongeza. Nataka kutuma salamu kwa watu wa Nyandarua na wafanye kazi kama vile wataona sisi tunafanya hapa Senate. Asante sana Bwana Spika.
Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr.
I want to join you, Speaker, in welcoming the youth empowerment team from Nyandarua. And I'm happy that Senator Mwangi Githiomi, who I appeared before when I was an intern in the year 2000, when he was chairman of PIC, is now here to join them. But also, I think it will be imprudent of us not to welcome Senator Yusuf Haji, and hope that he has completely completed the bridge he was building. Thank you.
Senator Cherargei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. From the onset, I want to join you to welcome the youth empowerment group from Nyandarua County. Mr. Speaker, I want to assure them that they can be the change they want to see. Some of us, as young people in this house, we are leading the way. We are doing all we can to ensure our youth in this country have a space in terms of legislative and going forward. So I want to assure you, you have our full support, and I hope my brother, a prolific senator, Senator Mwangi wa Githiomi, is a very tough chairperson. Is a good man.
Senator Nderitu, what is your point of intervention?
I heard the senator, he said he's a young senator. Then he's saying Senator Githiomi is the brother. I think he's supposed to say he's the father.
No, Mr. Speaker, I think he didn't hear me. I said Senator Mwangi wa Githiomi is a prolific person. I didn't say he's my brother, so I think unless it's okay. You can be my brother, you can be my elder brother, you can be my father, or even grandfather. But that one may it be. is to Mr. Speaker, sir, is to challenge the young people that from Nyandarua, that you can be the change that you want to see. I want to thank you for giving us a wonderful Senator Mwangi wa Githiomi is the chair of Lands and Environment, and I know he has done very well in terms of that. So I want to wish the young people very well. We are trying to ensure anything we do is to ensure that you get the best, because this is our future that we have as a country. And want also to welcome the chairperson of Building Bridges Initiative, Senator Yusuf Haji. And I hope, having completed the document will be for the benefit of Kenyans, but not specific individuals, as some of the members have alluded before, in funerals, in birthday parties, and in drinking sprees across the country. So I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mwangi wa Githiomi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to welcome the youth from the great county of Nyandarua. Mr. Speaker, these are great brains who have come to this Senate, and the youth is capable of taking the leadership of this country when their time comes. Mr. Speaker, these are hard-working youth. Mr. Speaker, I didn't say what Honorable Pogisho said, but I'm saying they are great people. They are very hard-working. The only thing that they have lacked are jobs. And I know pretty soon this Senate will devise ways of recruiting the youth so that they can be able to be self-sustaining. Mr. Speaker, I would like also to comment that the Senate has no grandfathers. It only has senators. I'm a senator for Nyandarua, elected by these great youthful people.
Senator Mohammed Haji, what is your point of intervention?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to declare in this August House, we are not there for any individual interest. BBI is there for the interest of Kenyans. We have gone around the whole county. We have had thousands of people at KICC, and the recommendation we are going to make is based on what the people have told us, including some of the senators who are here. So this myth of politicizing the issue should please cease, wait for the report to come out, and then after that we can discuss. Thank you.
Senator Nderitu, what's your point of order? What's your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, I did not get which point of order Senator Haji was raising, because it's Senator Nyandarua who was talking, and there was nothing wrong with what the senator was talking about.
What's your point of order, Utolo Kilozi Jr.?
I think so that Senator Haji is not misquoted or misrepresentations are made on his behalf. Perhaps, Speaker, you can allow Senator Yusuf Haji, and I said I'm happy, and I hope since you are here, a bridge has already been built. A statement of something of national concern to say you have completed your work, you're going to table a report, something, because this Senate donated you to the Building Bridges Initiative. I think we are just owed a one-page report, something.
What's your point of order, Senator Wetangula?
Mr. Speaker, I like what Senator for Garissa has said, and I agree with him and support him. But both him and his co-chair have maintained a very loud conspiracy of silence, Mr. Speaker, to the effect that people are now running out there bastardizing others, labeling others, abusing others, saying so-and-so is pro, so-and-so is anti-BBI, even appearing to know the content of BBI report, which they have not made public. And as we salute the good work you have done, you are reaching a Napoleonic...
Order, Senator Wetangula. I think we are deviating from welcoming the people of Nyandarua into a...
Allow me a minute, Mr. Speaker,
to BBI.
let me just finish.
Okay, Senator.
Because, Mr. Speaker, BBI was supposed to unite the country. It seems to be dividing the country even more. And we would want the chair. This House is privileged, Mr. Speaker, and you must be very proud as our Speaker for donating 2 giants from this House to go and chair such an important process. And we don't want it to end in an anticlimax with everybody carrying a rotten egg on the face because of enthusiastic lieutenants out there.
I think I want to shield Senator Haji, unless you want to say something yourself. But say something, but be careful not to make it worse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the honorable senators were following the happenings, I want to state here, I made a press conference that all the allegations which are being made is the making of politicians as well as the press. And I said the people should wait for the outcome. We have finished our work. They should wait for the outcome. When we hand over the report to the principal, then everything will come out, and then people have the right to comment about it. But in the meantime, please spare us.
Thank you, Senator Garissa. I think I want to make let's conclude on that, because not on the same. No. I think I have ruled. I think let the matter rest. I know Senator Yusuf Haji has a lot of experience. He used to teach us something called the need to know, and he knows what to say, where, and when. So let's take his word. The report will come out. The need to know policy principle. So I think I will only give Kidiomi. Can you conclude so that we make progress?
Yeah, the people of Nyandarua are strong. And
Senator
that is why you
Kidiomi.
hear that big noise. So I would just wish to conclude and tell the youth of Nyandarua that they are welcome to the Senate, and tell them that they should work very hard. We want a number of them to join politics in the very near future. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I think the Senator Nyandarua has done the welcoming, and a few of us. So let's move on, because in the interest of time. Next order.
Order number 3, messages. Order number 4,
What's your point of
petitions.
order, Senator Mazayo?
Mr. Speaker, I thought this was very important in view of the fact that I also wanted to join you in welcoming these people. I'll take only a minute.
No, I have already.
With tremendous respect, Mr. Speaker, I will only take a minute, the way my senior also requested for a minute, and you granted it. So I will only take 1 minute to also
Okay, Senator
join
Mazayo.
myself
Okay.
with you.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, I need your protection.
Order, members. I have given him I've used the discretion. Let him, 1 minute.
I'm obliged, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also want to join you in welcoming the people from Nyandarua, not the people, the youthful persons from Nyandarua who have come to witness how the Senate works, how we are so civilized here. Essentially, we have our own disagreements, but these disagreements are because we are debating national issues for the benefit of the entire country. Mr. Speaker, Nyandarua has produced giants like Githiomi, my brother Senator Githiomi. Nyandarua has produced Mzee Haji. So we have a lot of respect for people from Nyandarua, and we want to wish them God's blessings. And whatever you have come to learn here, you will learn, and it will help you when you go back to Mashinani. God bless you.
Next order.
Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers. Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, statements.
What's your, Senator Millicent?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on petitions, there is a petition which has been on the order paper for the last 2 weeks, which has been appearing, reappearing, and disappearing. It's from a county of Narok for the last 2 weeks. So please, Speaker, I would want maybe you advise about that petition. Thank you.
We are on statement, Senator Millicent and Romanga, so we are beyond petitions.
It was a point of intervention when they talked about the petitions.
No, but we had already passed the petitions. We are already in statements. So we'll deal with it next week. Next order. Statements. Statement. Who? Huh? Senator Kabaka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving this opportunity to issue request for statement pursuant to Standing Order 48-1 regarding land grabbing cases in Nairobi City County. Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to Standing Orders 48, subsection 1, I rise to raise a statement from the Standing Committee on Land, Environment and Natural Resources regarding the alleged land grabbing of an ECD center and playground for children in Mogoya Estate, Nairobi City County, known as LR number, Nairobi block 103/793. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the statement, the committee should address the following issues. Number 1, provide a report to why the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, EACC, delayed in investigating a complaint and made on 27th May 2014 on the alleged land grabbing thereof. The Speaker, sir, number 2, the said committee to provide a report indicating the ownership history of the said parcel of land since January 2013. Number 3, the said committee to explain the circumstances under which the said parcel of land was sold to one Mr. Isaac Abdullahi Ibrahim on 15 September 2014, while the investigation was still pending at the EACC. Number 4, Mr. Speaker, the said committee also to explain why the EACC has entered 2 consent agreement in court, that is ELC court number 1, case number 159 of 2019 with Mr. Isaac Abdullahi Ibrahim, one dated on 27th May 2019, and another consent dated 30th July 2019, allowing him to continue constructing, or rather construction, in the grabbed public land.
Lastly, Mr. Speaker, sir, number 5, explain the measures that have been put in place to ensure that the ESCC and DCI officers involved in the investigation on this matter do not use their personal, rather their official positions for personal benefits, and or to settle personal scores with whistleblowers, including the governor of Nairobi, Mike Songo, and other members of public affected by the said land grabbing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chila Yako.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this matter has been lately hitting headlines in news. The governor of Nairobi is being quoted as complaining that ESCC is pursuing him. Now, the committee to which this matter is being referred to, I want to request them to tell us what measures have been put in place to ensure that there is no abuse of prosecutorial powers by any institution to the detriment of the general public. I think this is the one that is at the heart of the complaint. And secondly, the committee should also tell us why quick and decisive action is not being taken against whoever is on the wrong, whether that person is the governor or some other person. Because as members of the public, we want the people responsible for this to be dealt with, whether they are small or big, fat or thin. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Sakaja, other.
To make my statement? Comment on this one. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Senator for Machakos, Senator Kabaka, for bringing this statement on Nairobi. It is interesting that it is similar issues raised by my governor, but I think they're all at liberty to consult either their city senator or their rural senator, because he comes from Machakos as well. Mr. Speaker, on to the content, to the content of this statement. No, he's a resident of both Nairobi and Machakos, so it is acceptable. Mr. Speaker, this matter has, as Senator Uchilo Yako has said, has been in the newspapers, we've seen it online, and it's a matter that looks like it's getting out of hand. Mr. Speaker, for me, what is sacrosanct, because there are many issues of land grabbing that we're trying to grapple with in the county of Nairobi, and this is not necessarily a special one. What makes this case really special to come to this House at this point, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that any allegation by a Kenyan under investigation that there is bias within the institutions of the ESCC, of the DCI, of the DPP must be taken seriously. Mr. Speaker, as a country that has decided to take head-on the fight against corruption, Mr. Speaker, I think such things or innuendo should not be left to chance. Every Kenyan must know that the fight against corruption is a fight that must be fought fairly, that there is no victimization, that there is no politics being played. So, Mr. Speaker, I have had many other insinuations from different quarters that either there has been a political witch hunt on this case or other cases, that, oh, it is a personal, problem between officers in the ESCC. I'm made to understand that the governor has also gone to court on a similar, matter on one of the officers mentioned here. I would urge the committee, and not just committee on land, because the committee on land will address the specific issue on the land grabbing, which is important, it must be addressed. But bigger than that issue, Mr. Speaker, is the feeling of bias, is the feeling of politicization of these offices that are very important in our criminal justice system. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would urge you that not just the Committee of Lands, but the Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs. We have had many even colleagues saying, for instance, at some point I had Senator of Nakuru having officers withdrawn, or other senators feeling that they're being victimized because of political stand. I do not think that is the country we want to have. That is not the country we need to have in the 21st century, Mr. Speaker. So I'd ask the very able senator from Nandi to also suo moto, I think that is what Mutula says, suo moto, on his own motion, to look at the issues within the institutions that are charged with making sure that we have a country where justice and a fair shot is a prerogative of all of us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, I think it's committed to Committee on Lands, but the Committee on Legal can be, on its own motion, can be invited to make comments. Senator Omanga, what's your intervention?
Oh, my mic, Mr. Speaker, was not working. I just wanted to contribute on the statement.
Already committed, Senator.
It's because my mic was not this.
I think next one, you'll comment on the next one, which is just coming.
No, Mr. Speaker, being a senator from the Nairobi delegation, I felt like I should maybe comment.
But Lokori, you have just put in now, and had already made a ruling. So we must make progress, because I'm also alive to the comments that I'm reading in our WhatsApp group, complaining about taking a lot of time on statements at the expense of very serious business. So, Senator Abdullahi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 48.1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget concerning the status of funds donated by the Danish International Development Agency to support gazetted level 2 and 3 health facilities in Kenya. In the statement, the committee should confirm, one, should confirm that the NIDA has recently transferred to the National Treasury Kenya shillings 468,750,000, the first half of 2019-2020 allocation as on-budget funds to support operations and maintenance activities in gazetted level 2 and level 3 health facilities in Kenya, which the agency has done since 2014. Number two, confirm that the NIDA has received audit reports for financial year 2017-2018 in respect of 35 out of the 47 counties, of which only 20 have adequately utilized the funds and are cleared to receive the 2019-2020 funds. 15 have unspent balances as of 30th June 2018. 11 are yet to supply sufficient information to enable auditors complete audit reports, and 1 has failed to account for Kenya shillings 2.5 million, and if so, name the respective counties. Number 3, state the measures in place to ensure that the respective counties fully disburse the funds to the health facilities or return the funds to the Danish embassy. Number 4, explain the steps taken by the National Treasury to ensure that counties cooperate with auditors to enable them finalize audit reports on these funds. Number 5, indicate the measures in place to ensure that funds donated under the current program, which ends in 2020, are utilized effectively by counties, and to also ensure that review of the program by the NIDA is in favor of continued support, which is badly needed in the health facilities. Number 6, state the mechanisms in place to monitor and evaluate fundings from donors to ensure prudent use of donor funds. Mr. Speaker, sir, these funds have been used by the county government from 2014, but now it looks like many counties are going to lose out because of non-audit reports. And when we get free money and we don't make use of it, this money is used at level 2 and 3 to pay the subordinate staffs, the junior health workers in those places, and a lot of them, the watchmen, a lot of them will lose salaries and their means of survival. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Senator Bogisho.
Thank you, Speaker. I just wanted to support the statement by distinguished senator from Wajir. Speaker, all our counties which have been mentioned in regard to this particular fund have to listen to this. And so I want to encourage the committee that's going to take up this matter, the Speaker, to pay great attention to those counties that have been almost blacklisted for not fully accounting for these funds. And Mr. Speaker, we should just set a standard, I think, as this House, that for funds that are grants, Mr. Speaker, that come from as our partners, that, Mr. Speaker, we should set a standard of being able to allow for those funds to be used correctly, to be used for the purposes that they were voted, and not to be misused. And there is always a potential, Mr. Speaker, that they will be misused. So I just want to ask that the committee gets to the bottom of these funds, make sure that nobody loses this grant as a result of not being careful or not being able to account. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Lelegwe, next statement.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 48.1 to seek statement from the Standing Committee on Roads and Transportation regarding the implementation of LAPSET project. In the statement, the committee should, 1, state why LAPSET Corridor Development Authority does not have a regional office in Samburu County, despite the county being the second longest host of the corridor project with 208 kilometers. To explain the criteria for employment of staff in the LAPSET project, giving numbers of staff from LAPSET corridor host counties per county that have been employed in the authority, including its field officers and the type of work they are engaged in. 3, state why the board of the LAPSET Corridor Development Authority is not representative of the corridor counties the project traverses. 4, state the number and nature of corporate responsibility activities being implemented by the authority in Samburu County, and explain why CSR activities such as the Presidential Scholarship Program in Lamu County are not being replicated in other corridor counties hosting the project. 5, state plans to put in place to ensure that Samburu County benefits from the LAPSET arrangements between the LAPSET Corridor Development Authority and various investors, including the Lokichar to Lamu Corridor Oil Export Pipeline Project. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Wamatangi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to, in concurrence with Senator Dr. Steve Lelegwe, who is a member of the committee chair, to undertake that the committee which I chair will look into those issues, chair, especially, Mr. Speaker, especially in light of the fact that news were released yesterday that indeed funding that was set aside for the Lamu coal plant project have been withdrawn, and that funding is no longer there. In the conceptualization of the LAPSET project, and especially around Lamu, that provision of subsidized power, as was earlier mooted in conjunction with coal power plant there, Mr. Speaker, would have some effect on the viability and feasibility of some of the aspects of that project. The Senator also has raised serious issues as to whether this project affects his people positively, given the fact that there seem to be some skewed hiring, Mr. Speaker. So I want to commit, as the chair of the committee, that we are going to undertake that matter, look into it, and give a report to this House that will paint a correct picture of where we are with the LAPSET project affecting the county and the people of Samburu, and indeed all the counties within which the LAPSET project cuts across, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Wetangula.
Mr. Speaker, as I support the statement by the distinguished senator for Samburu, when the chair of the committee comes to answer to this statement, Mr. Speaker, will he confirm that in effect the LAPSET project that was the brainchild of the retired President Kibaki's government has now been frustrated, abandoned, and those who intended to finance the project have pulled out? Will he also confirm, Mr. Speaker, that the LAPSET project, which was supposed to create satellite cities, including Isiolo, where there was to be an international airport, has been abandoned? Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi are constructing their own rail line and pipeline to the port of Tanga in Tanzania instead of going to Lamu. Ethiopia has constructed an SGR to Djibouti instead of depending on Lamu. South Sudan has negotiated and signed an agreement with Ethiopia to construct a pipeline from their oil fields to Djibouti, almost double the distance, and abandoned the construction through Kenya to Lamu because of issues of governance, overpricing of land compensation, and many other issues that cannot make this project viable and attractive. Will the chairman also confirm to the House, Mr. Speaker, that even the much talked about coal plant in Lamu, the financiers have now pulled out? The railway line that was supposed to be the offtake of cargo from Lamu to make Lamu Port viable as a LAPSET project will not be constructed because nobody is ready to fund it. And the upshot, Mr. Speaker, therefore, is that the LAPSET corridor project for Lamu, Isiolo, Turkana, South Sudan, and Ethiopia is as dead as a dodo.
Senator Mbogo, chila yako.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, LAPSET was conceived as a project that would be a game changer in this country. Mr. Speaker, energy sources like nuclear were predicated upon the fact that if you operationalize the LAPSET corridor, you would be able to have sufficient demand for that kind of output. I want to request the committee to which this matter will be referred to look at what losses we have suffered so far, to look at where the project is, and to perhaps report to the House the extent to which it is viable, if it is, or whether it is unviable, because a lot of water has gone under the bridge. Expectations that were based on this project are now dwindling, and other countries have taken strategic decisions that put them at an advantageous position vis-a-vis the siting of this. So as a House, we would be interested in finding out the viability of this project and whether in our speculative investment minds in future, we should continue thinking of investing in a LAPSET. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Finally, Senator Bogisho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, distinguished senator from Bungoma has gone ahead and given some answers, albeit unsolicited, Speaker, but those answers, Speaker.
What's your point of order, Senator Wetangula?
Speaker, I didn't give any answers. I had no intention of giving any answers. I don't chair any committee in this House to give answers. I was asking the chair of the committee. And Mr. Speaker, if you watched him as I was speaking, he was nodding with a lot of satisfaction to what I was saying, that he should confirm or deny the facts that I put on the floor. I wasn't giving any answers. Is he in order to allude to this, Mr. Speaker?
I think, Mr. Speaker, the Hansard will bail me out that answers were, attempts to answer were given to answers. And Mr. Speaker, I was not saying it in bad light. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I was going to follow up on those answers. And Mr. Speaker, to seek that the committee, given that information, Speaker, should help us understand, if at all, we are still on course on LAPSSET. If not, Mr. Speaker, whether there should be a need to continue pumping in monies if we've lost the cost. And Mr. Speaker, if it is not going to be that the LAPSSET project goes all the way to the other countries, then it loses the name, the whole name, Mr. Speaker. And so I think the good thing to ask is, with that kind of information given, Mr. Speaker, plus more information, the committee has more work to do in order, Mr. Speaker, to let us understand the value for money when it comes to LAPSSET. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Kimani Wamatangi.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I want to acknowledge, and indeed when the senator from Bungoma was making his contribution, I was keen listening so that all the facts that he's laid out and questions he wants answered do not escape my mind, Mr. Speaker. That is why he said I was nodding in agreement, but I was nodding in acknowledgement that those questions would require to be answered. And I want to assure Mr. Speaker, so that we don't get into speculation without facts, that this committee will undertake to bring a comprehensive report on the viability, the current status of the LAPSSET project, and indeed, if we are still on course. Mr. Speaker, as in the public domain, there has been work carried out at the Lamu port, including expansion of some berths and building of some berths, which are supposed to be launched in the very near future. But, Mr. Speaker, let all that be answered with a statement that we shall bring here, Mr. Speaker, and even without your prompting, allow me to commit that within the next 2 weeks we are able to bring that report, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr.
Speaker, will you allow me, before the chair leaves chamber of transport, a very big tragedy happened in Likoni Ferry some time back. I requested for a statement which the Committee of Transport, led by the able, effervescent Senator of Kiambu, Kimani Wamatangi. I am aware that the committee visited the ferry to establish the status, but every day, Mr. Speaker, we get worrying statements about the status of the ferry. Recently, somebody sent me a picture of MV Arambe leaking a lot of water. This week, there is a bus that was stuck at the ferry. It's important, Mr. Speaker, that you direct the committee to tell us and tell the country the status of those ferries. Thank you.
The Chairman, Transport, I think that's a very, just like I mentioned yesterday, some of these things that are occurring need very serious attention so that tragedies don't occur, then, you know, we cannot be able to explain. Like the ferry, really you have to say something here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I first want to confirm that Mr. Speaker, when the Senator for Makueni sought the statement on the status of the ferries, my committee, led by myself and including almost 8 members, visited Kenya Ferry Services. Mr. Speaker, we invited the Cabinet Secretary. He sent 2 permanent secretaries. And we toured the ferry site, Mr. Speaker. We went to the offices. We went and inspected the ferries themselves. In the resolutions we made, part of those resolutions, Mr. Speaker, were that 3 of those ferries, in the view of this committee, are not seaworthy or worthy of being used anymore. And indeed, they're not viable. And we only stopped short of declaring that they should not be used immediately. But, Mr. Speaker...
So, Chairman, what the House is asking is that statement needs to be made here.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, yeah. I want to confirm that we are compiling a report that we are going to table here, but allow me to also confirm that out of the undertakings and the visit by this committee, the Ministry of Transport, after we pronounced ourselves that we are going to immediately recommend the grounding of those ferries, an amount of 2.1 billion was reallocated the following day, Mr. Speaker, out of the actions of this committee, to purchase of new ferries, and indeed one of them that had been earlier purchased, Mr. Speaker, we were informed will arrive in January, and Mr. Speaker, we're expecting that we will get a complete schedule of when the other ferries are going to arrive. I want to give the Senator an assurance that my committee is neither afraid, and what I said as the chair with my people there is that we are going to use the mantra that is used by lawyers, that even if the heavens come crumbling down, we shall take action, and we shall recommend even grounding of those ferries if they are not replaced, to make sure that our people are safe, Mr. Speaker. We shall bring the report, Mr. Speaker.
They say the pudding of the ice is in the eating. So the House will wait for that report. You seem very determined. I have a communication before we move to the next statement. I would like to acknowledge the presence in the Speaker's Gallery this afternoon of Mr. Gianpiero Menza, an international development professional. He's currently working as a UNJPO with the Alliance of Biodiversity International and International Center for Tropical Agriculture, SIET. The Alliance of Biodiversity International and the International Center for Tropical Agriculture operates in more than 50 countries and has had its African regional hub based in Nairobi for 30 years. The hub is contributing to the efforts of reaching the continent's potential through innovative science to ensure agriculture is competitive, efficient, and sustainable. The Alliance is strengthening the role of the hub in Nairobi and aims to work more strategically with the Kenyan government. On behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, I welcome him to the Senate and wish him well for the remainder of his stay. I thank you. Senator Olekina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I join you in welcoming my good friend, Gianpiero Menza. Gianpiero Menza is working to help
Okay, you
this
can
country,
take your seat.
In terms of food security. It's very, very important for us to think about food security. And one of the things that the company that he works for, who he's actually been seconded by the government of Italy, is to come up with crops that are drought resistant. And with the weather patterns in this country, it is something that we fully welcome. In Narok County, we have a challenge sometimes of drought, and a lot of our crops are damaged. So it's a good thing to have companies that are working on that, and countries that will be able to help this country achieve food security. So I welcome him, and I hope that you will join me in welcoming him. Thank you very much.
Next statement, Senator Sakaja.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to request for a statement pursuant to Standing Order 47.1. I rise to make a statement on the prohibitive licensing and operational costs levied on photographers and drone operators by the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, KCAA, and county governments. Mr. Speaker, on the 7th of November 2019, the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority announced the prohibition of use of drones by photographers and videographers. This follows the levying of an exorbitant fee of 1 million shillings for a license for the operation of drones. In addition to this, Mr. Speaker, and I would wish senators listen because this is affecting many young people in this country, county governments have been charging photographers exorbitant rates and filmmakers to operate within their counties. This is more so in Nairobi City County, where photographers are forced to pay about 11,000 or more to shoot on the streets of Nairobi per day. Mr. Speaker, sir, one of the greatest challenges in our society today is the high level of youth unemployment. Many of our young people who are talented and innovative have taken it upon themselves to pursue careers in the creative economy. Mr. Speaker, in countries such as Nigeria, the creative economy has proven to be a frontier for job creation, being the sector that has the second highest employment rates for the youth. In these countries, their governments have taken deliberate action to ensure a conducive environment to nurture and grow the creative industry. On the converse, it seems as if the elements within the Kenyan government that have also taken deliberate action to stifle and slow down the sector of the creative industry. The creative industry is heavily taxed, and hurdles are being placed daily on the path of young creative Kenyans who only wish to use their God-given talents to eke out a living. A simple illustration, Mr. Speaker, would show that an average business operating within the Central Business District of Nairobi would pay an annual business permit of between 10 to 45,000, Mr. Speaker, depending on the size of the entity. but a photographer, a young person, a videographer, has to pay between 11,000 if they decide to shoot once a week, coming to 400,000 shillings a year. If they would further wish to employ the use of drone technology, which is being used everywhere, we have seen it in weddings, we've seen it in political rallies and in functions, they will need to pay 1 million shillings, bringing it to 1.4 million shillings to our young people. This is definitely unfair. The exorbitant fees charged to filmmakers and photographers have led to international filmmakers opting to look for other destinations to shoot films, even films about Kenya, about Safari, about Lion King, about Masai Mara, even Wakanda should have been done here. The opportunity cost to our economy and our youth is much greater than the revenue expected from these licenses. Mr. Speaker, sir, and I am glad the chairman of the Committee on Transport is listening and the vice chair on ICT is also listening, because there's the two committees. These are matters we must look into seriously. Government agencies such as the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority and county governments must not be allowed to remain stuck in the past in this day and age of technological advancement and high rates of unemployment. Mr. Speaker, drone technology is being used all over the world today. That is why sometimes when some appointments are made and some categories of people are given boards, we make noise because they cannot understand that the world is using drones. Instead of simply prohibiting the use of drones, the KCAA must engage stakeholders on matters of safety and regulation so as to come up with simple and clear regulations. Meanwhile, the notice banning the flying of drones must be revoked forthwith. County governments, starting with Nairobi City County, need to engage stakeholders in the entire creative industry, including those who are harassed daily, the DJs and the musicians performing, and withdraw prohibitive fees levied by them. If anything, Nairobi City County would greatly benefit by engaging these stakeholders and partnering with them in showcasing the beauty of Nairobi, the art and the soul of this city, as has been done in many other great cities around the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad the chairman of Transport has just shown a lot of confidence in that ministry. I hope that confidence will also translate to lifting this ban, which is retrogressive. It sounds like we're in 1921. This is 2019, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Cherargei Samson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I rise to support the statement by Senator Sakaja, Chairman of Labor and Social Welfare, and the Senator of this great county of Nairobi City. Mr. Speaker, you have to note that we are headed into festive season. The young people in this country cannot be observed into job market. Most of them are hustling their way, and some of this is the way they can earn a living. The entertainment industry is one of the biggest, and it's one of the opportunity. It creates most opportunities for the young people, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, on the issue, when you have attended many festive occasions, you have noticed that photographers, use of drone operators, and other film makers are always present. It is the new norm in the modern day festive occasions, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is shocking that Kenya's Civil Aviation Authority, which cannot protect us from a falling wheel of an airplane, can impose 1 million shilling fine to some young people who are trying to make a living. There is no job for these young people in this country. Which other thing do you want these young people to do to earn a living when we can't give them more opportunities through the employment, even in counties, Mr. Speaker, sir? So these exorbitant prices that you want to impose on use of drone, especially during occasions of festive season, Mr. Speaker, I think it is very punitive, and the committee concerned must come out and defend and protect the young people of this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. The Kenya Civil Aviation Authority should concentrate on making our skies very safe. You can see the other day, there have been mishaps of local airlines within the country, Mr. Speaker, sir. They have a more important job to do than regulate drones that are being used by young people to make a living. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is very unfortunate, and I want to thank Senator Sakaja. He feels the pain for the young people, and we cannot allow young people, we are telling them to look for opportunities, to be frustrated by KCAA. This must stop, Mr. Speaker, sir. Even as we try to tell you, by the way, I have heard, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I conclude, I have had many policymakers telling the young people, go outside there and look for opportunities. You didn't go to school to get a job. They are now looking for opportunities through filmmaking process, through taking photos and videos. And yet the same system is trying to punish them, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I think the young people should be protected from such punitive measures that are being imposed by KCA. If there are licensing procedures that should be there, Mr. Speaker, sir, it should be affordable, it should be reachable. We want to see the young people also prosper, because the entertainment industry in this East Africa, Kenya is one of the leading areas, Mr. Speaker. And I hope, as a Committee of Legal Affairs, we are willing and ready to assist in some of the formulation of legislation to allow we have a friendly licensing process for the young people, which is simpler, faster, and efficient for the young people in this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. Let us stop tormenting our young people. Let's give them opportunities so that they can prosper. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mtula Kilonzo Jr.
Thank you, Speaker. It's actually unfortunate, and I thank Senator Sakaja, that somebody can ban drones. They're actually called unmanned aircrafts. For me to know how the migration happens in Masai Mara, somebody actually followed the wildebeest using a drone until the crossing. And it's possible that person paid a lot of money to you for that licensing. That is somebody, that is a job you can give young men to do. Mr. Speaker, aerial photography is a thing that is being done all over the world. To manage the traffic jam in Nairobi, you need aerial photography and drones to be able to fly all over Uhuru Highway to tell you where you have these trouble spots. The only reason there is a prohibition is to make sure the rich people in this country are the only ones who can fly drones. If you go to shops all over the world, these drones are like toys. They are bought everywhere. It's only in Kenya where you would make a prohibition. Senator Sakaja, maybe you're not aware that the regulations were published recently in the Kenya Gazette, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. That is a place where we should go. And if we cannot get a resolution, Senator Sakaja, you're famous for going to court, go and get them nullified. That is what you need to do. Get an omtata somewhere. Because the regulation-making process is not supposed to be a legislative-making process. When I stood here and said regulations cannot substitute parliament, this is what I mean, Senator Sakaja. When you are voting for the ceiling, this is what I was stopping you from doing. Thank you.
Senator Kihika Susan.
Hiyo ni kali. Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you very much. I also rise to support this statement by the Super Senator of Nairobi, Senator Sakaja, who is also the chair of the Committee of Labor, but also really known in this country for really standing up for the youth of this country. Now, when we look at this statement, Mr. Speaker, it's quite obvious that those who are in KCAA, as well as the county governments, they either seem to lack creativity in their thinking, or they are stuck in the dark ages and have not seemed to move along with technology and come to the realization that this is where the world is heading. So when you also see them come up with these sorts of exorbitant fees, I mean, 1 million shillings, how many Kenyans have 1 million shillings? We just had the census results come out a few weeks ago, and we saw the youth are about 66% in this country. We also know there is a very high rate of unemployment in this country. So when you have the youth generally who are trying to make a living, and especially right now, as we are coming up to the wedding seasons, to the birthday and holidays and Christmas seasons, this is something that would make a lot of sense. But when you're charging them 11,000 shillings per day to do this sort of thing on the streets, then you wonder really whether we have a crazy KCAA or the county government as well, while the KCAA should be more concerned with other bigger issues that we've seen. We recently saw a man who hung on a plane and fell off in London. those are the sort of things that they should have their eyes open for, and not just following these youthful young men and women who are trying to make a living. We've also seen many unregulated airlines, be they whatever the names are, you all know, who are taking off and wheels are coming off, and we just see them, they keep flying. So clearly there is a problem in the sense of they are too caught up on little things and have lost sight of the big picture. However, I'm also concerned that as a country, we seem to be really catering to the rich people in this country. I am not so sure that many people can afford these sorts of fees unless you're very rich. So unless we want to kill the little fish and make them not be able to compete in this industry, then there is clearly a problem. So I support this statement, and I say to them too that they need to get up, they need to wake up, and they need to get on with technology so that they can move us forward and not backwards. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Olekina.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you. I rise to make comments on this statement. Mr. Speaker, sir, I hold a different opinion or view in terms of licensing of these drone operators. When the Kenya government, or rather the civil aviation, published regulations, some of the things that I remember that they highlighted was that for you to be allowed to fly drones, you must have some knowledge, of aircraft. We live in a city where, or navigation, on how to navigate. We live in a city where we have planes crossing on a daily basis. I don't know whether we are thinking about the dangers that these drones can cause on aircraft which are flying in this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, in Masai Mara, we do not allow drones. And I know South Africa was actually one of the countries that, that banned drones in safari parks. So I think as we want to encourage creativity and encourage entrepreneurship skills, we have to be very careful on what we are doing. Drones can cause a lot of damages.
What's your point of order, Senator Sakaja? Information. Do you want to be informed?
Absolutely.
Mr. Speaker, information is power, and I'm glad Senator Ledama is keen on that. Two things, Mr. Speaker. Number one is that there are various different categories of drones based on the length of flying that they can go, and the time and the size. This is a blanket ban on all drones, and the height, the altitude. Secondly, Senator Ledama Olekina has distinguished himself. He's gone around the world trying to plant trees and to protect the Mau. I want to inform you, Mr. Speaker, that in Australia and in the UK, drones are being used to plant 400,000 trees a day. So how is Senator Ledama Olekina speaking from both sides of the mouth that they've banned the drones, yet you can plant 400,000 trees a day using drone technology? I thought you were 21st century, Ivana. Yeah.
I don't have a problem being informed, and I appreciate Senator Sakaja informing me. But all I'm saying is that we must be very careful because we're in a city. Let us not, let us not mix issues here. I have no problem with us regulating those drones. But as we proceed, we have to make sure that those people who operate those drones, do so following the regulations which have been set out by the Kenya Civil Aviation. One of the things that I agree with Senator Sakaja and the other senators who spoke on this issue is on the issue of prohibitive fees. Maybe that is the area we can be looking at. But in terms of safety, I would be very, very careful not to allow anyone who has no knowledge on how flight performs in this country to be able to operate a drone. So my view is this. Although I support the statement by Senator Sakaja, I would want us to be very careful. The reason why we don't allow drones in Masai Mara is because we have balloons flying, and someone could be sitting from a remote area and control a drone to be able to go. So I think the most important thing which we ought to do is to ensure
there is
that
information
if we
from
have to classify
Senator Kabaka wants to inform you. Do you want to be informed?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I don't wish to be informed. I wish to end there.
Okay. Senator Borgisho.
Speaker, just in support, Speaker, I'd like to also let you know that I've been the chairman of the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, and I know I know, Mr. Speaker, that it's a complex issue that I hope that the committee that is charged with this can also include the two committees of interest. Maybe one committee would be the Committee on ICT, but the other committee as well, Mr. Speaker, is the delegated legislation, because all regulations must come to Committee on Delegated Legislation. And Mr. Speaker, maybe for if they have not been to the House, then the regulations won't function, Speaker. I think that's one thing that needs to be told to KCA as well, that regulations have to be ratified by both houses. Maybe they have gone to one house and they have not been to this house. And Mr. Speaker, we're going to demand that the regulations come to this house so that we have a good way of looking at it. But before that, Speaker, the committee can as well, might as well do good to visit KCA and understand their point of view. There are points, Mr. Speaker, that caused us to, when I was in KCA, and I'm not going to speak for KCA at the moment, but as Olekina has said, there are some issues that need to be considered. Drones are not just the tiny little cameras that fly. Mr. Speaker, the ones we're talking about may just be the ones that each family can have, but drones are bigger and do greater things, and they can also spy. And Mr. Speaker, so we need to know which categories are what, and it's good for the committee to bring out all these issues. Speaker, the other thing, Speaker, that as I can say is that Nairobi is mostly military airspace. And that maybe for the Senator of Nairobi needs to know that, and that is not for us to change. It is mostly a military airspace. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that as the committee handles these matters, they should just come up with a way of helping artists, helping people in photography and filmmaking to make their work easier, so that, Mr. Speaker, we can also build our capacities in that area. That's where most of the youth get employment. So I'm in support of the statement, but, Mr. Speaker, I hope the committee spends a lot more time, and if interested, I can be a friend of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Petronila.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I would also love to join my colleagues and thank Senator of Nairobi for this statement. Mr. Speaker, we are in the 21st century, and Senator Olekina is a true manifestation of this century, just looking at him. So for him to imagine that we don't need these drones for us to have this photography license.
What's your point of order, Senator Ledama?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I never at any given time made a statement saying that we do not need these drones. All I said is that we have to be careful. I support Senator Sakaja 100%. But in Nairobi, just like Senator Pogisia said, this is a completely different airspace. So I totally support the drones, but we have to know which category do we support. Because we cannot just have drones. Any drone that is planting trees in the Mau Forest, I support 100%. But drones flying anywhere where they are military, they are dangerous.
What's your point of information, Senator Sakaja?
Mr. Speaker, now, this will be the last time I come. Mr. Speaker, the statement that I've made to talk about this issue. Mr. Speaker, the statement that I've made is very clear, that there is need for regulation, but you cannot use excuses like military base. I want to inform the House, Washington, D.C., Mr. Speaker, is the airspace around Washington, D.C. is more restricted than any other airspace in the world. But in the regulations, they have made it very clear that you can fly drones of a certain size. In fact, they call it a Special Flight Rules Area, SFRA, within a 30-mile radius of Ronald Reagan base. They have Andrews base, they have the Pentagon, but they have the highest number of drones as well. So we cannot be stuck in the past saying, oh, if it is military, don't fly anything. But we regulate and say that this size of drones can fly in this area, because a young person shooting a wedding in Arboretum or shooting a wedding at the National Park, what does that have to do with military? So that's the information, and I'd like to urge members just to go online, take some time, see what the rest of the world is doing. Kenya is not the only country with military. Kenya is not the only country with security, but we cannot be banning young people.
What's your point of order, Ledama?
Mr. Speaker, sir, Senator Sakaja used an example of the United States of America. But it is important to note that in the US, they have the technology to detect any kind of drone in their airspace. We do not have that technology in this country. I think if we invest that technology, I will support that. But we have to be careful. Any information that goes out there, Mr. Speaker, sir, is something which is going to help us. So the best thing to do is Kenya Civil Aviation to bring those regulations into this House so that they can become law, just like what Senator Pogisia said. But we have to be careful not just to accept technology that can endanger our lives here.
Senator Petronila, proceed.
Where was I? Okay. Mr. Speaker, that said, thank you, Sakaja, for that information. Mr. Speaker, I also wanted to say that policies are supposed to be facilitative, not to prevent or to be prohibitive. Policies in this country seem to be fighting with wananchi. They seem to be fighting with the people instead of helping the people to facilitate their work. Mr. Speaker, that is one area that shows talent. And we are slow in this country in developing talent and encouraging talent. America is known worldwide for its talent development. Their film industry is so huge, and they even use that industry probably to sell their agenda to the rest of us. So and yes, Hollywood as an example. So it does not just end in shooting videos for weddings or birthdays or environment or in the Masai Mara, but it goes beyond that. And we are looking at creating jobs for our young people. Where are these jobs going to come from if our policies are preventing them from doing so? Mr. Speaker, 1.5 million for a young person is very, very high. In fact, even our youth fund, now when our young people go to ask for money from the youth fund, there are also other policies there that are prohibiting them from getting this money. Mr. Speaker, there are processes in developing policy. One of them is researching on who the target is. I'm wondering if KCAA looked around and found out who is their target as they put up these policies. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this statement and thank Sakaja for bringing it here. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, we have 5 more statements. Therefore, I'll just allow one Senator Cheriot and one from this side, then we move on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to support this statement because it's a very important issue. And unfortunately, I have seen a lot of misinformation in the course of debate, but I thought it wise to perhaps keep quiet, listen, see as people are being informed and misinformed as well on the importance of this unmanned aircrafts, Mr. Speaker, and the purpose for which they're meant to serve. I think the whole point of this debate, Mr. Speaker, is where government sits down and comes up with a blanket ban on an entire industry without thinking through a particular exercise. Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time that this is being done. If you go to, and Mr. Speaker, you're fairly familiar with various towns in the Rift Valley. If you go to Molo and Joro today, these towns are completely dead. And the reason, somebody sat in a well air-conditioned office at Kenya Forest Services and thought that the people that are involved in timber and sawmilling business are a nuisance to this country and gave a blanket ban. That is not how to run a country, Mr. Speaker. And we must begin calling out government for what I consider, I'm really restraining myself not to use unparliamentary words, but some of these decisions, Mr. Speaker, are hurting people. Mr. Speaker, this decision is going to hurt very many young people who are involved, for example, in photography and the film industry in general. And therefore, all this debate about the drones interfering with flight paths are completely misinformed, Mr. Speaker. Because, first of all, they do not even have the ability to get to those heights where they can interfere with planes. What you are talking about, Mr. Speaker, are basic and simple drone services that cannot go beyond even the height of KICC, Mr. Speaker. You want to inform?
Do you want to be informed? Do you want to be informed, Senator Cheriot?
I accept, Mr. Speaker. I know this is a former chair of KCA. It's part of the problem, so.
Senator Bogisho.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, may I inform the House that there are very many, you also Google this, there are very many near misses that drones almost hit aircrafts. Mr. Speaker, this is all over the world. So I don't think, Mr. Speaker, we should be told that they don't cause any danger. Mr. Speaker, I think I just want to help the young senator to understand that this is a very serious matter. Drones are not the ones for photography only. Drones get bigger. They can fly and get lost completely. You can lose a drone completely, control of a drone, and it can go anywhere. Mr. Speaker, it is important that people know that drones can interfere with flights. Thank you.
Senator Mboko Ochilo Ayako, what is your point of intervention?
Mr. Speaker, I wanted to offer information to Senator Arun Cheriot regarding drones. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is true that anything that is able to fly as high as a plane is dangerous, including birds. If you go to these airports and airstrips, you will find that marabou stock and so many birds, like in Kisumu, when birds and other things fly around there, it's quite dangerous to try and land or try and take off. So if drones are the size of a bird or bigger than a bird, Mr. Speaker, when you have a crash, you will never find out what happened. Even your body may not be found. And if you are a Luo, that's terrible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Proceed, Senator Cheriot.
You see, Mr. Speaker, what Senator Pogisio and my good friend Senator Achilo are saying is exactly the problem. Nobody is arguing for the use or otherwise of drone. What you are arguing for is this lazy government technocrat who sits down and draws up one statement saying drones are banned from flying in these particular spaces. Mr. Speaker, drones have got specifications. We are not asking that the highly technical ones, like what is used in Rwanda, to do drop of drugs, drug drops, what they refer there as drug drops, that have got the ability to fly from one particular region to a further distance. We are talking about people being diligent in their work. If you are paid to think, then think through a policy decision. Ban out in specific areas. Don't just ban out in the entire country. For sure, in a place like Kericho, where the only plane that they see is in way thousands of feet above sea level, Mr. Speaker, because there is no airport near within. What is the problem in using a drone for photography? It doesn't have the ability to get all high up to beyond 5,000 feet to interfere with a flight path. That is the point that you are trying to make, Mr. Speaker. The fact that there is a blanket ban, that is a point that I want my colleagues to understand, that government officers should be diligent, and as they make decisions, let them know that those decisions affect the lives of people. That's a simple point you're trying to make, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, it is in that thinking that I agree with Senator Sakaja. Thank you.
Finally, on that matter, Senator Wambua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also rise in support of the statement by Senator Sakaja. Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by saying that the use of drones is actually the new reality in effective communication and messaging, not just in this country, but across the world. You cannot talk about effective communication and messaging and exclude the use of drones. Mr. Speaker, the last time I checked, and Senator Narok is walking out, he was very passionate about the conservation of Mau Forest. There can never be a more effective equipment to use to gauge the extent of damage of forests, not limited to Mau, but all forests, than the use of drones. The Speaker, I think the statement by Senator Sakaja is very clear. It's a blanket ban on the use of drones. The Speaker, in September, as a member of the Transport Committee, I attended a conference organized by the International Civil Aviation Organization in Canada. And the Speaker, from that conference, it is clear that the world has moved. The use of drones, the use of loon technology is actually doing very, very well in many, many countries outside this country of ours. The Speaker, the use of drones, even those commercial drones, in dropping medical supplies in remote areas, is a technology that's being used everywhere. And I think the thing to do, Mr. Speaker, for us in this country is for the authorities concerned we are not opposed to regulation on drones, but we are saying, why can't they bring regulations on the use of drones debated in Parliament and passed so that we don't allow KCAA to kill innovation and to kill opportunities for young people to use drones, Mr. Speaker, for photography. I thank the Speaker and I support.
The Chairman, Transport. But I also wanted to direct, because as I sit here, the Vice Chair, okay, say something before I give a directive on that also.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this issue, as very clearly debated by the members, shows that somebody did not do his or her work when coming up with this kind of a ban. And as a committee, I think we're going to take it up from here. Maybe in 2 weeks' time, we should report back to the House.
Other members, I think earlier on, since we are still on statements, there were concerns raised. Order Senator Cheriot. Order Senator Cheriot. What is this drama you are? You are demonstrating something that you and the leader of majority seem to understand. I was going to say that in view of the seriousness of the ferry matter, I want to direct the chair of that committee to bring a full report on Wednesday next week. A comprehensive report on the status, so that we are able to move forward. And going forward, that's going to be the way we operate, so that we are seen to be serious. Yeah. Chairperson, Standing Committee on Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a statement relating to activity of Standing Committee of Finance and Budget pursuant to Standing Order 51(1)B for the period of 1st of July to 30th September. Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 51(1)B to make a statement on the activity of Standing Committee on Finance and Budget for the period commencing 1st July to 30th September 2019. Mr. Speaker, during the period under review, the committee held a meeting, held a total of 15 sittings and considered 3 bills. Also had 3 engagements with stakeholders. In respect of the bills, Mr. Speaker, the committee considered the following 2 bills. Division of Revenue Bill, Senate Bill number 13 of 2019. Division of Revenue Bill number 2, Bill National Assembly number 59 of 2019. And the County Allocation of Revenue, Senate Bill number 8 of 2019. Regarding the Division of Revenue, Bill number 13 of 2019, the committee considered the bill and proposed amendments which were considered and approved by Senate. The bill was referred to National Assembly. Regarding the Division of Revenue number 2, Bill of National Assembly, Bill of number 59 of 2019, the committee considered the bill and proposed amendments which were considered approved by Senate. However, National Assembly rejected the amendments of the Senate and the bill was referred for mediation. On the matter of division of revenue between the 2 levels of government, the committee proposed a framework to shield counties from cash crowns in the event of prolonged mediation process. Regarding the allocation of revenue bills, Senate Bill number 8 of 2019, the committee considered proposed amendment. The bill was approved by the House on 17 September 2019 and referred to the National Assembly. The committee considered the county government cash disbursement schedule and tabled the report in the House. Additionally, pursuant to Standing Order 126 of the Standing Order of the Senate, the committee considered pre-publication stage a legislative proposal on amendment of Procurement and Asset Disposal Act by Senator Aaron Cheriot, MP. Mr. Speaker, regarding the statements pursuant to Standing Order 48.1, 4, statements were referred to the committee during the period under review. The statement was sought by Senator Fatuma Dulo concerning pending bills owed by Isiolo County, Senator Ochilo Ayako concerning loss of financial and procurement record of Migori County Executive, Senator George Khaniri regarding additional charges levied by the levied on the residents of Nairobi City County seeking rate clearance certificates from Nairobi City County government, and Senator Agnes Zani on the status of operationalization of IFMIS, Integrated Financial Management Information System, in the 47 counties. The committee is considering the matters raised and will table a report once the matters have been concluded. Mr. Speaker, the period under review, the committee held joint consultative retreat with a sessional committee on delegated legislation and the National Treasury on to deliberate on the draft regulation on public procurement and Asset Disposal Act 2015, several issues that needed further considerations were raised, and National Treasury would get back to the committee on the same. Mr. Speaker, the committee has planned to undertake the following activities in the next month's period. Consideration of the Public Finance Management Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 63. Consideration of the criteria basis for allocation among counties, share of national revenue allocated to county level of government, consideration of various proposals submitted by different stakeholders on provision of Public Finance Management Act 2012 that require to be revised through necessary amendment. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next statement is from the Chairperson, Standing Committee on Information and Technology, to issue a statement relating to the activities of the committee. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 51(1)B to make statement on the activities of the Standing Committee on Information and Technology for the period commencing 1st July to 30th September 2019. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the period under review, our committee held a total of 7 sittings, considered 2 bills and 1 statement. The committee also held the three engagements with stakeholders and 1 county engagement. Mr. Speaker, sir, in respect of bills, the Data Protection Bill 2018, Senate Bill number 16 of 2018, which was considered, the Data Protection Bill was a bill sponsored by our committee. It was passed in the Senate and forwarded to the National Assembly, but unfortunately, concurrently, another bill was introduced by the CS, which bill has since been assented to by the President. But in a bid to resolve the stalemate that ensued, the committee held a couple of meetings and 1 consultative meeting with the counterpart committee, the Departmental Committee on Information and Communication and Innovation, on the 23rd September 2019. I wish to report to the House that the committees were not able to reach an amicable solution, and that this matter continues to generate quite a bit of discord. Mr. Speaker, sir, regarding statements, the committee has 2 statements awaiting its consideration. In the quarter under review, it considered the statement by Senator Ledama Olekina on the protection of consumer data by telecommunication companies. The committee met with Cabinet Secretary for ICT, representatives of the National Treasury and the Central Bank of Kenya to discuss responses to the statements. The pertinent issues were exhaustively canvassed. The committee established that most of the mobile money service offered by telecommunication companies, service providers often are backed by banks which are regulated and thereby protecting consumers and their data. The committee, however, noted that there were mobile-only lenders, essentially online Sherlocks, who are not regulated. They place the customers at risk, and which then places the customers at risk and may end up exploiting them. And this was canvassed and further action recommended, which is being pursued by the committee. Our committee is also holding consultative meetings to determine how best to regulate this sector for the purposes of protecting consumer financial information and data. With regards to statement by Senator Sylvia Kasanga on the status of mobile connectivity for marginalized areas and special projects, the committee has invited the Cabinet Secretary to provide responses in the month of November. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee has been engaging with stakeholders on the issue of the basic 2G connectivity across the country. Connectivity being a human rights issue which enables access to basic services like with contact security services. The committee is meeting with Communications Authority of Kenya to discuss implementation of the Universal Service Fund, connectivity for marginalized areas, and projects of Phase 1 and 2. It noted that the project was being implemented in collaboration with private sector partners and encouraged the CAK to ensure that the projects are implemented within the prescribed period. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee has been engaging with Telkom Limited on a series of issues surrounding the company. First, the committee met with the company to discuss the progress of its implementation of its allocated projects under the Universal Service Fund, Phase 1. The committee also noted that the company had implemented up to 80% of its allocated sub-locations and commended the company for its efficiency. Secondly, the company was scheduled to merge with Airtel Kenya. However, the said merger has encountered some headwinds. The committee is scheduled to meet with both Airtel Kenya and Telkom Kenya Limited to discuss the challenges facing the merger between the two companies. The committee has actually since met. I think this report must have been done the week before we met. We've met since, and a lot of issues have already been streamlined therein with a view to meeting again for further discussions. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the execution of our broadcasting mandate, the committee has been concerned about the state of the national broadcaster, Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. The committee met with the management of the corporation to be apprised of the turnaround strategy. In a bid to support the process, the committee established a subcommittee comprising of 3 senators to closely follow up on the implementation of the plans and to interface on legislative and policy interventions to help our broadcaster along. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regards to our engagement with counties, the committee, while in Kitui County during the Senate sittings in September 2019, met with the counterpart committees of the Kitui County Assembly and the Communications Authority of Kenya to discuss 2G connectivity in Kitui County. This was a review of implementation meeting following a visit to the county by the committee in August 2018. The authority is in the process of implementing measures to improve connectivity in the county following resolution made at the meeting. And the committee also conducted a site inspection visit to a digital service mast site of the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation that enables digital television services to various underserved parts of the county and the country at large. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee intends to carry out the following key activities during the next quarter: meet with Telkom Kenya and Airtel Kenya on status of their merger, conduct a regional capacity building workshop with 6 coastal counties, hold consultative meetings with the National Treasury, Council of Governors, and the Commission for Revenue Allocation on ways to improve revenue management in our counties, and meet with the Ministry of Information, Communication and Technology to receive responses to statements, and meet with Communications Authority on the National Addressing System. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Sakaja.
Mr. Speaker, I seek a quick clarification from the chair of the Committee on ICT on their statement, because the chair has said that they want to call Telkom and Airtel to inform them on the status of the merger. Yet, Mr. Speaker, serious questions have arisen on the merger of Telkom and Airtel. One of those questions, for the benefit of the chair, is that the scope of the deal is only involving mobile as well as enterprise, but it is not forming the real estate. Telkom has 13 billion in real estate, in land, in buildings, in sports clubs, etc. But they're saying that the shareholding of the new firm will only be known at the end of that merger, Mr. Speaker. We need to understand, because these legal entities have already existed, that if the share and shareholding and value will remain unknown until the end of the transaction, is it correct to conceal this to the taxpayers? Because they're Kenyans who are really affected, Mr. Speaker. So can the Vice Chair just let us know? Because there are so many issues that we've raised, even including about Helios shareholding, the British, etc. Let it not just be them coming to brief you, but if the Vice Chair can take the serious questions that this House has on that matter. We've seen how many public companies or companies where Kenyans have interest in have gone through mergers. They come, they offload, they sell the assets. Here we're talking about more than 13 billion. Once they've sold it, they say that they're no longer interested in that new entity, and they sell their shares and they leave after having fleeced us. And we've seen it even in Vipingo, Mr. Speaker. So kindly, may the Chair clarify that that is the kind of analysis they're going to do for this House.
Senator Abshiro Lake.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank Senator Sakaja. Senator Sakaja, actually, we have had a series of meetings on this issue, and we can share with you the information. It's just that some of it was falling outside of that period that we got. But that said, they have separated the businesses. What is being privatized is not actually the properties. It is just, I think it's just the mobile business and some enterprise businesses that are being, but that said, this is still ongoing. As you can see, we will give you a proper report. In fact, what we had was so that not to jeopardize the process and the negotiations, because as you know, some of these things are commercially confidential and may form part of the negotiation process, and we sort of gave them that leeway to finish. But that said, they've assured us, and they've given us actually some stuff in camera, and I would like to assure this House and to Kenyans that every interest of Kenyans has been taken care of, and we're satisfied. It's just that we respected the confidentiality of the commercial transactions. But that said, you rest assured, and we can share with this in camera.
Honorable Senators, and statement pursuant to Standing Order 51(1)(b). The statement C by the Chairperson, Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights stands deferred. Next statement, Chairperson, Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare. Senator Sakaja.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to give the statement relating to activities of the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare, pursuant to the provisions of the standing orders for the period commencing 1st July 2019 to 30th September 2019. Mr. Speaker, I will go very quickly because, as you know, my committee has done a lot of work. It's too much. I can't read everything. And I'm glad the majority leader can see the size of the document. If he was concentrating, he'd have noted.
Chair, you can proceed with the summary.
So I will just do the summary. Mr. Speaker, we've done 18 meetings where there have been thorough 5 bills, 4 petitions, 4 statements. We've engaged with stakeholders and have done public hearing forums. Mr. Speaker, we've considered 5 bills: County Government Retirement Scheme Bill, Personal Disabilities Amendment, the Museums and Heritage Bill, Care and Protection of Child Parents, and Establishment of Children's Homes, and we've been able to file reports on those bills. We held stakeholder engagements and public hearings on the bills that I've mentioned. Mr. Speaker, we've also been able to deal with 12 statements committed to us. One was by Senator Kaniri on the rampant closure of businesses and laying off of employees in the country. And indeed, there are many others we've concluded on. Minimum wage guidelines by Senator Kaniri, high teenage pregnancies. There's one on disbursements of old person cash transfer. We've dealt with the matter of registration of persons with disability and protection of Kenyan citizens working in Saudi Arabia. We've also held, and we're continuing to deal with the matter of our drivers who under the digital hailing cabs, Uber, Taxify, Little, Bolt, and we're meeting them again next week. We gave them a timeline and they agreed on regulation. They're coming back to us next weekend to give us the progress on how we will have minimum charges that will make sure that our drivers are protected in this country. And the consumer is also enjoying affordable services. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of statements where we sought responses. Senator Musuruve on the issue of Article 54. There's another statement on PWDs, who brought honor. Senator Dr. Ali brought a statement on pension plans, as well as one on hiring of public servants on contract basis, on inclusion of persons with disability in the labor market by Dr. Zani, among others, and we've been able to conclude. But, Mr. Speaker, something that we must say as chairs, because I've experienced this both in this Committee of Labor and the Committee of Security, is that we try to make the work easier for those who ask questions. When they request for a statement, we invite them to the committee to interrogate the response, but many are not showing up. So we have decided that we will give you the response and invite you. Whether or not you show up, we will continue. So members, kindly do not raise that matter on the floor if we have invited you and you have refused to come, because the committee does not wait for no man. Mr. Speaker, we've dealt with 5 petitions conclusively as a committee. There's one petition which we are tabling the report next week by Senator Susan Kihika on the dumping of street children. Senator Mary Senators, we have dealt with 2 petitions, one on the issue of Enol Turesh, another one on the issue of non-recruitment of flower farms. She is so excited. She has said that she's going to have a rally next week on Wednesday in Kajiado with the report of the committee. There was one by Senator Isaac Maura, and I'm glad he came and joined us, on the clearance requirements. Our young people are being asked for too many clearance requirements before applying for a job. You asked for help, you asked for KRA, you asked for CRB, you asked for good conduct, all of them coming to around 5,000 shillings, Mr. Speaker, yet you're a job seeker. We held a very successful meeting last week, where we had the governor of the central bank. On top of that, we had the HELB director and the commission. We also had the directorate of CID, DCI. And as a result of that meeting, Mr. Speaker, the governor of central bank has actually issued a position that they will be soon announcing that for every job seeker, and anybody who is seeking their first ever credit reference bureau clearance, it will be free of charge. And every year you'll have a free credit report, courtesy of this petition and of our committee. The DCI has also proposed to waive charges for job seekers, as well as HELB, because HELB charge you 1,000 shillings if you do not get HELB, which does not make sense. Because maybe the reason you don't get HELB is because you don't go to university. So why are you being charged for not having a loan? But we've agreed that in the first quarter of next year, they're going to withdraw that fee of 1,000 because of the IT system that they're putting in place. Mr. Speaker, labor and social welfare issues are unique in a sense they deal with intricate matters of day-to-day life of Kenyans. So especially to the petitions and statements, even when the committee tables our reports and the reports we've tabled, Mr. Speaker, our committee has continued to follow up the relevant government agencies to ensure directives are implemented, and we will continue following up these agencies. Going forward, the issues we're focusing on now. Number one, labor issue is very key across the counties and in the national government. So we are planning to hold and to host between the Senate and the national government and the Council of Governors and the county governments a national labor summit, which will bring together all major players to deliberate on these issues, including staff welfare, inter-county transfers, sharing of rare and specialized enterprises that one county might have, another county doesn't have expertise, harmonization and standardization of job groups. Mr. Speaker, in every county there are 3 categories. There are those who are there in the county councils, there are those who got transferred from national government when functions were devolved, and there are those who've been hired by governors. You find 3 people doing the same job under different schemes of service and different remuneration, different pension arrangements. We want to make sure that part of our legacy, before we leave this house, is that we'll have sorted that out. The first part of our legacy was to create a pension scheme, a retirement scheme for county workers. We have done that. So our committee is achieving its goal. On top of that, the issue of operationalization. Mr. Speaker, this word needs to be banned from the English language. Operationalization of the National Employment Authority. Mr. Speaker, everyone who says that word has difficulty. We never hear. But this is also key on our priority. We've inquired into the charges being charged by institutions on the creative industry, including the statement I've just given, because these are frontier for job creation, and we don't want growth of artists being curtailed. And we're inquiring, Mr. Speaker, this we're taking very seriously. It was raised last week. The Speaker gave me, asked that we undertake, that we look into it urgently, the issue of football and the sporting industry in this country. The fact that we have a sports, arts and development fund with more than 8 billion, yet we have our athletes, our soccer players, our sportsmen and women stranded in airports, stranded in hotels outside the country, and the money is there, and the money has been approved. Mr. Speaker, when we come back with the report, I think this House will be pleased because we are already knowledgeable about what's happening in that sector. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I want to thank my 9 committee members who have been very dedicated and shown great interest and have been really participating. My committee on labor normally, on a bad day, has attendance of 6 members. And they always come, and I think they're excited to on a bad day. And that is when Cherargei is not around. Normally, it is 7 members, without fail, in the Committee of Labor. Mr. Speaker, the clerk of the committee didn't write this, but I also want to thank the Secretariat of the Senate for the great support they give our committee. I feel that our committee is highly favored and blessed. And I want to thank our clerk assistant, Monate Shaban, who does an amazing job. Jeremy Chabari, who is our legal counsel, is an excellent mind. He has helped us navigate through a lot of murky waters in legislation, as well as the rest of the team, including our Sergeant at Arms, who makes sure that members are comfortable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Statement pursuant to Standing Order 52.1. The Senate Majority Leader.
Honorable Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 52.1, I hereby present to the Senate the business of the Senate for the week commencing Tuesday, 19th November 2019. On Tuesday, 19th November 2019, the Senate Business Committee will meet to schedule the business of the Senate for the week. Subject to further directions by the committee, the Senate will consider bills due for second reading and those at the committee of the whole stage. The Senate will also continue with the consideration of business that will not be concluded in today's order paper. Honorable Speaker, the following bills are due for second reading and at the committee of the whole stages respectively, and will be scheduled accordingly by the Senate Business Committee. Bills at second reading stage. 1, the Registration of Persons Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 14 of 2019. 2, the Care and Protection of Child Parents Bill, Senate Bills number 11 of 2019. 3, the Kenya Sign Language Bill, Senate Bills number 15 of 2019. 4, the County Licensing Uniform Procedure Bill, Senate Bills number 17 of 2019. 5, the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendments number 2 Bill, National Assembly Bills number 13 of 2018. And 6, the Alternative Dispute Resolution Bill, Senate Bills number 19 of 2019. Bills at Committee of the Whole stage. 1, the Retirement Benefits Deputy President and Designated State Officers Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 2 of 2018. 2, the Kenya Medical Supplies Authority Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 38 of 2018. 3, the Cancer Prevention and Control Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 9 of 2019. 4, the Street Vendors Protection of Livelihood Bill, Senate Bills number 10 of 2019. 5, the Establishment of Children's Homes, Senate Bills number 12 of 2019. 6, the County Tourism Bill, Senate Bills number 5 of 2019. And 7, the County Hall of Fame Bill, Senate Bills number 39 of 2018. I urge respective standing committees to expedite consideration of the aforementioned bills and to table reports within the stipulated timelines. This will facilitate the House to effectively navigate the committee of the whole stage. Following the communication from the Chair issued on Wednesday, 13th November 2019, regarding the business of the House, I urge respective movers of the bills and committee chairpersons with amendments to be in the chamber whenever the bills are scheduled on the order paper. Honorable Senators, as you are aware, the Senate Business Committee directed that Thursdays be designated as a day to consider motions. Accordingly, it is expected that movers of motions will be available in the chamber whenever their motions are scheduled in the order paper. Honorable Senators, Standing Order 51-1B provides for quarterly reports to the House by select committees relating to their activities, including consideration of bills, statements and petitions, and enquiries undertaken. Last week, I tabled a schedule of reporting by select committees and is already being implemented. To this end, I wish to thank chairpersons of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries, Devolution and Intergovernmental Relations, Education, Energy and Health committees for presenting their reports without fail. I urge all other chairpersons of committees to prepare and submit their reports when scheduled in the order paper. Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank you and hereby lay the statement on the table of the Senate. Thank you.
Next order. Order number 8, motion. Reports of the Parliament of Kenya delegation to the Global Summit on Open Governance Partnership.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I want to, the motion on open governance, and my seconder will handle the rest of the part. I'll just highlight a few, the report of the committee, the report on the proceedings of Open Government Partnership Summit that happened in Canada. And my seconder, Senator Susan Kiiga, will handle the rest of the part. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Open Government Partnership Summit that took place from 29 to 31st May of 2019 at the Shaw Conference Center in Ottawa, Canada. The summit brought together the 79 member countries and 20 local governments of the Open Government Partnership, OGP. It also brought together participants from local and regional governments, of course, local including county governments, civil society groups, academia, and beyond. This year's OGB Summit focused on participation, inclusion, and impact, and provided an opportunity for parliamentarians to exchange with peers, civil society actors, and other open government stakeholders on important policy issues of relevance today, such as parliamentarians to exchange. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, this year's OGP Summit focused on participation, inclusion, and impact, and provided an opportunity for parliamentarians to exchange with peers, civil society actors, and other government stakeholders on important policy issues of relevance such as disinformation, beneficial ownership, transparency, gender equality, participatory and inclusive policy making, public sector innovation, anti-corruption, artificial intelligence, and access to justice, among others, Mr. Speaker, sir. The meeting was opened by Robert Nolt from Canada, Member of Parliament and President of Pal Americas, and Ms. Blanca Ovala from Paraguay, Senator and President of the Pal Americans Open Parliament Network. In his opening statement, of course, he emphasized the need for members, for parliaments to make effort to transform the relationship between public by promoting transparency, accountability, and participation, and high ethical standards. While Mrs. Blanca, of course, welcomed, she averred that in bid to continuously improve their representation and oversight role, the Parliament should collaborate with civil society actors and other stakeholders in order to undergo a continuous parliamentary strengthening. She noted that open Parliament action plans co-created by Parliament and civil society have been an important mechanism that many parliaments have used towards this end, and therefore suggested the parliamentary standing initiative that have been contributed. Furthermore, the summit provided an opportunity for parliamentary delegations to exchange with peer civil society actors and other stakeholders on participative and inclusive practices to identify sustainable solutions to problems that impact citizens' daily life. Honorable Speaker, during the conference, parliamentarians acknowledged that Parliament is a key actor in society transformation, as many relevant reforms require new legislation or legislative amendments. Through their role of representation and oversight, which of course the Senate of the Republic of Kenya oversights the county governments, parliaments observed that they have a responsibility to promote and engage in public policy issues that affect their constituents. Parliamentarians also noted, Mr. Speaker, sir, the critical role of parliaments in identifying key development priorities in their countries and overseeing implementation. This was particularly asserted during the various sessions in the summit. Parliamentarians also discussed how citizen involvement in decision-making can be enhanced, fostered, and strengthened. And it's worth noting, Mr. Speaker, sir, that as we talk, the Parliament is processing public participation bill, which has been transmitted to the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker. And of course, our Constitution has given is a people-centered decision, especially at county governments through public participation. And we have seen our courts, Mr. Speaker, sir, have been focusing majorly on ensuring that they give decision to need for public participation, citizen-centered decisions. This is one of the ideals of open governance OGP programs that we have. And Parliament being a critical both in oversight and legislative role, the people, the decisions that are being made should be given an opportunity. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the delegation from the Parliament of Kenya comprise the following. Of course, Honorable Moses K. Cheboy, it's not Mr. MP, and also Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, the Chairperson of Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights, Senator Fatuma Dulo is the co-convener and a member of Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights, Honorable Sarah Korere, MP, Honorable Hilary Kosge, MP, Honorable Mohammed Ibrahim, MP, of course, Florence, Director Committees, National Assembly, Rose Mudibo, Clerk, Assistant Senate, Kavata Mushoka, Clerk, Assistant Senate, and Ms. Angela Masharia, Second Clerk, Assistant Senate. The Kenyan delegation participated. Of course, I did participate at some point, Mr. Speaker, sir, in the deliberations and robustly presented our country position during various sessions. And it is important that we shared experience with the new constitution that came into place from 2010, and we shared the experience that our constitution is now people-centered, citizen-centered, many institutional, both in public and private. Mr. Speaker, sir, the people of Kenya have been given a unique opportunity in terms of decision-making. And I think those are some of the best practices that we have been doing. And most, Mr. Speaker, it's worth noting that most of the key decision-making that have been guiding through the People's Watchman because of public interest, and you remember this constitution, has given any Kenyan an opportunity to walk to a court of law and challenge any key decision-making being made by specific institutions that we have. Honorable Speaker, of course, if you look at Article 10 of the Constitution of Kenya, it has provided for national values and principles of good governance. So I want to emphasize that Kenya is one of the key countries in this region, in Africa, that is the leading light in terms of open governance, especially through the Parliament, and even we hope other arms of government like judiciary, like the executive, like even the county governments, Mr. Speaker, because we have been having problems where some of the decisions have been just been made through what we call village gatekeepers. That any decision that is being made by the county government, they rent what we call village gatekeepers or town gatekeepers. Say that some of the decisions are not made by the real citizens, but are just being made by specific rent seekers that are being hired by county governments, especially during budget policy process, during the key decision-making, especially on finance issues, on the decisions by being made the county government. My clarion call as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, sir, is to call upon the county governments to embrace, I hope somebody else will not to embrace, you know, embrace has a different meaning in this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. I'm trying to no, it's not about Inua Mama, but embrace. I'm trying to get for a better work. The county government should welcome should welcome the issue of open governance. And I'm happy that in the convening that is being chaired by the Deputy President, Dr. William Ruto, and we had a conversation about it the other day because we have Senator Fatuma Dula as one of the co-conveners, is to allow the county governments, like Nakuru County government should be ready to ensure that the decisions they make, not only in Nakuru County Assembly, but also by Nakuru County Executive, they should be ready to face the decision. And therefore, I challenge governors and also county governments, and even our county assemblies, to stop this issue of making decisions in the dark, or having village gatekeepers, or having just a decision that is just based, Mr. Speaker. And I want to tell you for a fact, Mr. Speaker, as these are some of my concluding remarks, most of the court cases that county governments face, Mr. Speaker, sir, is because the county governments have not involved the people. People are just questioning on public participation, people interest, the citizen participation. That is why most county governments are in court. Because even on budget issues, they have been taken to court. On policy issues, they have been taken to court. It is some of the few legislations that have been taken to court on some few occasions by the public. So it shows that the public participation space in Kenya, especially in this region, and entire Africa and part of the world, has been the leading light in terms of opening space for citizen engagement, Mr. Speaker. So I want to call upon county governments. I know governors fear that when they engage the people, when they engage the population, they fear as if they are doing them a privilege. It is a right, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I want to challenge members of National Assembly, and it is good that one of our delegation, the Honorable Deputy Speaker, Moses Cheboy, was the leader of our delegation as a Parliament of Kenya. I want to challenge my colleagues and brothers and sisters in the National Assembly. Let us fast-track public participation bill to allow our county governments to have a uniform legislation that they can rely in terms of making a decision, in terms of ensuring that we open the space that we are talking about, Mr. Speaker, sir. So I want to challenge the Parliament of Kenya, especially the Senate, that let us, all of us, Mr. Speaker, sir, support anything that ensures that we have an open governance programs within our system. And I also want to challenge, even as we call upon the national government and the county governments to provide, I want also to call upon the private sector. They play a critical role. They should also share the information. When you look at Article 34 and 35 on the right to information and right to media freedom in this country, we want to challenge other stakeholders who are non-state organs to be part of the entire process of opening up their spaces, sharing the information, which is a constitutional right, and ensure that we move forward in some of these issues, Mr. Speaker. And as a committee, we are ready to come up with legislation, policy, regulations that will be in place to ensure we assist in open governance. And I want to challenge all these state organs. If you make decisions in an open, transparent, fair, and citizen-centered, and people-centered, and public participation, I can assure them you will have many Kenyans being happy to be part of that decision-making. Even as we talk about the Big Four agenda, Mr. Speaker, sir, we need to ensure we bring everybody on board so that some of these decisions that we make, let people know what is happening. And I'm happy through your office, Mr. Speaker, sir, before I forget, we are happy when the Speaker, the Senate Mashinani program, the other day, Mr. Speaker, you led us to Wazingishu County. Now Kenyans know what is the role of the Senate as provided for under Section 96, and I'm happy the House leadership is here, Senator Susan Kiiga. They have been part of the instrumental of opening Senate so that people can understand. I know there are some organs before, especially the executive. They have been having a narrow interpretation of what the role of the Senate is in many issues, from even budgetary process, which was put in petition number 2, when this Honorable Senate moved to court. That even at that time we now, and you know, Mr. Speaker, sir, I didn't want to say this, but allow me to say this. Most of the state officers are in confusion. They need to understand that the narrow definition, as they have been trying under Article 96 of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, sir, does not mean that the Senate only, and that is why I have been seeing this misnomer that is going around the country, that the Senate only comes in when it is issues of counties. When you talk about security issues, Mr. Speaker, sir, The security issue, if there is an insecurity in Nandi County or in Nakuru County, or even in Samburu County, that is a county. These people live in a county. So we want to ask the state officers and the functionaries and the executive that they should be alive to the issues that we provide and ensure that we have and ensure that we move forward, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Senate of the Republic of Kenya is very instrumental in ensuring that the people of Kenya know what the government should provide for. We want to challenge the judiciary also. I know they are facing budgetary cuts, judiciary. We want also judiciary to ensure also they lead in terms of ensuring an open governance. We know that the Chief Justice, I've seen the supplementary budget, Mr. Speaker, sir, on the budget cuts of austerity measures that have been introduced by CS Ukur Yatani. But we must also be alive to the fact that it should not threaten the right to information of the citizens, which is a constitutional right. It should not threaten the openness, the transparency, the accountability, the access of information, the access of justice, the administration of justice that has been provided by our Constitution, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, yesterday you hosted us for a foundation leadership dinner. And one of the winners of Leadership Talbak Foundation yesterday mentioned that the Constitution of Kenya is so progressive that it is being admired across the world. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it is important that you all we want the Speaker, not necessarily the dinners, but such forums so that we can engage and ensure that we exchange information. And these are some of the issues that we want to see and ensure that we provide information to the necessary. I know there is sometimes, Mr. Speaker, sir, because of information of security nature, sometimes the government is not classified information. We appreciate that. But there is always an Access Information Act that was assented to, I think, in 2015. Mr. Speaker, sir, if I'm right, that legislation, those pieces of legislation, Access to Information Act, the issue of public participation bill, which is in the National Assembly, should be fast-tracked to ensure that we create an open governance and ensure. And I want to call upon my colleagues, the Senate, let us use this forum, let us use open governance programs to ensure we open up our spaces and share with the people, because the people should always, they say information is power. And when you have a population, when you read, as I conclude, to allow my second, Senator Susan Kiiga, to proceed, when you read about the history of Singapore, the founding father of Singapore, Mr. Speaker, sir, said, before doing anything, you should sell the vision to the population. How do we sell the vision to the population of Samburu County if they don't know the vision, if they don't have the information that you want to change them? Through either annual development plans, through county integrated development plan, through the processes that we have, Mr. Speaker, sir. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to challenge all these stakeholders. Let us open and ensure we engage the government, we engage various agencies. And finally, Mr. Speaker, sir, let me call also upon the citizens of Kenya. The public interest, the custodian is no longer the Attorney General. Anybody can walk to a court of law. Anybody can walk to any government institution and demand an information as provided for under this Constitution, Mr. Speaker, sir. So I want to challenge the citizens of Kenya. They should not also sit back. They should look for this information. It is their right. It is not a privilege. It is the information that they give, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to call also the citizens of Kenya, let us be responsible. Let us look for this information. This information is being provided, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can see my time is almost spent. Therefore, the delegation is grateful to the speakers of the two houses, Senator Speaker Kenneth Lusaka of the Upper House and the Honorable Speaker J.B. Muturi of National Assembly of Kenya, and also for allowing us to attend the conference for facilitating travel and accommodation and providing logistical and technical support in liaison with the officers of the clerks from two houses. And it is now my pleasant duty on behalf of the delegation to present and comment this report. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Senator Susan Kiiga, from our majority whip, will second me, and the Senator of the great people of Nakuru County. And of course, the next governor of Nakuru County.
Can I read the...
Senator Susan Kika.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to second this motion on the open government partnership. And our chairperson of the Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights, Senator Cherargei of Nandi, has done a very comprehensive job in bringing out the issues and the principles that Open Government Partnership, the OGP, stands for. I participated in one of the global summits, and that was back in 2018 on the 17th to the 19th of July with Senator Fatuma Dulo, who is the deputy leader of majority, and it was in Tbilisi, Georgia. It was actually quite outstanding to see how this related to our situation back here at home in Kenya, as far as our devolved government, our system of governance, and how important it is to have open government in carrying out our parliamentary duties and in just really involving the communities and the citizens of the counties as well as the country in whatever decision making that we partake in as parliamentarians or as the executive. In Georgia, actually, the summit was preceded by an open day of their parliament, and it was actually chaired by their chairperson, who is the Speaker of Parliament, and then the OGP event followed the following day, and the Prime Minister of Georgia was actually the person who opened it. It was quite interactive as we had speaker after speaker talk about how important it was to be focused on civic engagement, fighting against corruption, and public service delivery. And I could not overemphasize how important that is, even in our own setting back home. It's important that we have civic engagement, as only by having proper public participation, actually, that the Constitution requires. It's in doing so that we are able to sort of provide the services, to have the public service delivery that the citizens require by really being open in all manner of governance. It's important that even as we fight corruption, that the citizens are aware of even what to report or what does that constitute really, and have the proper institutions in place to be able to have this fight against corruption. So that is one of the things that really stood out, given how much of an issue it is in our country as we stand. One of the major objectives of the summit was also to just provide peer learning. And I do recall some members from Georgia, actually, talking about how in their different local governments, now that equated maybe to the county at our level, in our system of governance, where you would have the citizens so engaged and so aware of what's happening, so that if the county assembly, for example, if the governor was supposed to say, for example, provide a hospital or put up a hospital, and the county assembly had passed a budget so that that hospital is actually built, then you would have the citizens in that area aware of that. They would know what the budget is, what the timelines are, and then they would actually go a step further beyond knowing that, and have a telephone number where they would call into the county and sort of give the progress of the project. So I thought that was amazing, as it was actually the actual citizens or citizens monitoring these projects and not waiting until nothing is done, and then a year or two later we are complaining that money was spent but we don't see the project. So when they're involved from beginning to end, it really seemed to go a long way as far as curbing corruption, but also making sure that there is proper public service delivery. On another level, we really also talked a lot about having open government. And that's obviously, even as the name of the summit sounds, the Open Government Partnership. That is a very important objective in governance, especially when you talk about democracies. Unless we have open government where the citizens are able to know what's happening, what's going on, be able to just walk into institutions and get information, then that goes a long, long way in strengthening governance in any country, and also in strengthening institutions, especially where they know that they're required to be open to the public and to be open to scrutiny, and to be able to also always give information and feedback, and also provide data and whatever is required of them if it's requested by the citizens or by any other institutions. And that would go actually a long way in having a very inclusive, just, and sustainable democracy by having this open governance. We also had quite a bit from a lot of delegations on on the universal right to access to information. And I think that's something that we are also catching up as a country. Sometimes a few years back, it was impossible to just to get information really. And now, due to the new constitution, the laws that are in place, it seems a lot easier to get access to information. But we still have a long way to go. And as long as we have that, then it's going to go a long way in opening up our government affairs and making them easier to scrutinize, even to scrutinize the public officers themselves and to hold them accountable. Because we cannot say that we are a democracy and we are unable to hold people accountable, or to at least be able to know what's going on at any given institution, and just have the ability to access that information. There was also quite a bit of conversations around leveraging on technology and media so that we are able to bolster citizen engagement and enhance public integrity. And once again, that goes again to open governance, because once open governments, because once the media is reporting on what's going on, then you have citizens who are informed, who are engaged, and who know what's going on. And then integrity then becomes a norm. But as long as we have a closed system, then we can never get there. So it was quite an amazing summit, and it is one that Senate, given our role in protecting counties, but also in oversighting counties, is one that really adds value. And I would actually recommend that as many senators in the coming years who are able to attend, because this was one in Georgia and then another was attended in Canada the following year. So there'll be one coming up and another as well coming up year after year. So I think there's a lot to learn, especially as it regards oversight and being able to have effective oversight on our institutions, on our government, and also being held accountable by the people as their representatives. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to second. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, I propose the question, which is that this House notes the reports of the Parliament of Kenya delegation on Global Open Governance Partnership Summits held in Tbilisi, Georgia, from 17th to 19th July 2018, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, 20th February 2019, and in Ottawa, Canada, from 29th to 30th May 2019, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 11th July 2019. Senator Abshiro Alaki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think this was a mistake, but thank you for the opportunity. I forgot to switch off my mic. But thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support the motion, and to just make a comment perhaps on the whole issue around open governance, Mr. Speaker, which specifically from the angle of policy and legislation, perhaps is something that plays very well with our public participation and citizen engagement, as well as accountability to our citizens. And I hope that the team that went, I think this is something that we need to participate very robustly going forward, that the team that has participated in this perhaps looks at this forum and comes up with key issues around transparency, around participation, around accessibility, and come up with open, and for me as a vice chairperson of ICT committee, listening to both the seconder and the mover, Senator Cherargei, I couldn't help but think that this would make a very important source of legislative initiatives for our House, especially with regards to the open data policy and legislation and open data guidelines, as well as the appropriate laws for transparency and under participation for the public and the citizens, perhaps, and collaboration with our citizens, things around social media, legislation around social media, policies around social media, and open source legislation as appropriate. And in terms of just ensuring that we legislate around accessibility for open standards and around policy and intellectual property policies and legislation and related legislation as appropriate. So, Mr. Speaker, I support that we as a parliament continue to engage with open governance, because it does give us a lot of ideas and a lot of opportunity for our, especially for our legislative initiatives, but also just our accountability mechanisms, not just with our counties, but also ourselves being accountable to our citizens. I support.
Senator Moses Kajua.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion on the report of the Open Government Partnership Summit that has been laid on the table of this House. And Mr. Speaker, Open Government Partnership is an initiative that ought to be embraced by many of our governments at the county level. We have seen certain measures and certain efforts that have been taken by a few county governments in this country to make the operations much more transparent, to make the operations much more accessible to the public. When we went to Makueni County, we found that Makueni County has developed a portal. And on that portal, it is possible to track the projects that the county government is undertaking. It is possible to track the location of the project, the cost of the project, the percent that is complete, and the impact that the project is having on the lives of the people. And this then should not be an exception. This should be the norm across the 47 plus one governments that we have in this republic. We were also told recently by Elgeyo Marakwet that they are adopting a similar framework to ensure that the operations of government are made much more open and much more accessible, much more transparent and accountable. Mr. Speaker, the business of government should not be like the business of some mystic or cult organization. Unfortunately, that's how it has been in many of the county governments. Our experience in Public Accounts Committee, where we are required to open up the servers, for lack of a better word, or where we are required to open the books of counties, sometimes you find situations where county governments do not want to be open and transparent, even to the auditors, who are mandated by the Constitution to get in and confirm that public resources are being applied in a prudent manner. Mr. Speaker, this country has never seen prosecution of any person for violation of Section 62 of the Public Audit Act. The Public Audit Act states that any person who holds any information and refuses to provide it to an auditor or to any other person who's lawfully authorized to get that information commits an offense, and subject to conviction would be jailed for a number of years or fined several millions of shillings. The counties that have adopted a much more open approach to governance are miles ahead of that requirement of Section 62 of the Public Audit Act. In fact, that particular provision was put there knowing full well that many governments will want to be opaque, and many governments would want to treat information as a favor that would be dished out to citizens at the whims and at the mercy of those who are in government. We as a Senate, and particularly the ICT committee, must start looking at some of these frameworks that would facilitate openness, that will bring about transparency, and come up with perhaps an architecture that can be adopted across county governments. Beyond the frameworks that would promote openness, allow me, Mr. Speaker, to veer off a little bit and talk about the frameworks that would also ensure that our county governments are able to operate in a seamless and in an interoperable manner. And Mr. Speaker, the ICT committee has been talking about an enterprise architecture that ought to be defined by the Ministry of ICT. When we went to the fourth schedule of the Constitution, matters of policy were left to the national government, and implementation was largely left to county governments. When it comes to policy around ICT, this still lies in the hands of the national government. When it comes to integration frameworks that can allow county governments to talk to each other, frameworks that can enable integration, this is a duty that the national government has not responded to very well. They have published an enterprise, a government enterprise architecture framework, but it just lies somewhere on a piece of paper. It has not been cascaded across all counties. If county governments are going to undertake their operations in an open and transparent manner, and as an information professional, I know that by the time you are publishing data on projects, you must have captured it through certain processes. You must have a procedure through which you aggregate data, put it together, have it in a platform or a database or a data warehouse, where it can then be manipulated to produce the kind of information that would be important and that would give rise to the kind of open frameworks that Makueni and Elgeyo Marakwet counties are using. So it's not just a matter of publishing results, publishing progress. It's about capturing data. It's about defining your data sources. It's about having the right technologies that can capture that data, that can manipulate that data, that can convert it into information. And so, to promote openness, there are a lot of things we can do. We can go for some of these functions, like the report that has been brought to this House. But there are things that we can do locally. We must ensure that we have proper frameworks and enterprise architecture that county governments and county government entities can adopt to be able to convert the data that they have into a form that can then be published to the public in the form of information. Mr. Speaker, there is a time when the national government had invited developers in this country to build application program interfaces, or what we call APIs, that would then plug into the government data stores and then would be able to generate all sorts of data simulations. One of the most valuable sources of data at that point, and I do recall I was in the industry then, was what we call the Integrated Personnel Registry. I think it's called the IPRS. The IPRS is managed at the Ministry of Immigration, and it was established during the days when my namesake was a Minister for Immigration. What it does is to aggregate the details of citizens, birth records, death records, motor registration records, passport, national ID records, and puts it in one place. Mr. Speaker, when you send an M-Pesa message, and then it returns the name of the person, and sometimes it returns names that you would never know. So for example, you are sending an M-Pesa to someone who for a long time you have believed is called Sue Kihika. And then M-Pesa returns a name like Susan Wanjiko Gadhoni Kihika. That's when you get to know the real names of people. And that translation from an ID number to the real name that sits in the registration database was facilitated through the IPRS. And a lot of corporates, Safaricom plugged into the IPRS, banks and insurance companies plugged into it, and it enabled organizations and institutions in this country to make use of the data that we have and to innovate and to also ensure secure provision of services. Mr. Speaker, the next frontier, and it has been said, that data is the next fuel, it's the next gold mine. I was quite impressed. I don't get very impressed much by British prime ministers, but I was quite impressed when the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom went to the UN General Assembly. And instead of talking about the war in Syria and the situation in Iraq and the situation in China and the problems with India, he talked about a future that is driven by data, a future that is driven by technology, a future that demands greater openness, a future where government and open governance frameworks and open government standards would be at the center of each and every decision. Mr. Speaker, I suspect that Prime Minister Boris could have seen the future. I suspect that the scientists and innovators in his country have told him the future is not about war in Syria. It's not about oil prices. It's not about trade wars with China. The future lies in technology and the innovations that will be driven by data. And in that future, already we are generating tons and tons of data. Mr. Speaker, every single moment you wake up, you are generating data unknowingly. Your phone will be logging your location. Your phone will be logging what time you woke up. Your phone will be logging how many steps you have taken. At the end of the day, that phone will have generated megabytes of data about you. And over a lifetime, there will be gigabytes of data about you. And when you put that together for the 5 billion people in this world, there'll be trillions and trillions of gigabytes of data. Now the question is, will that data be used for good or it will be used for bad? So Speaker, it will be possible to build trends. People will know which is your favorite hotel. People will know which areas you go to. In fact, through data, it will be revealed if you have a second wife. Because if your usual residence is in Lavington, and every day at around 9, 10 p.m., you are somewhere in South B or South C. I think those are the most famous destinations. Those trends will be able to tell a lot of things about you. So we're already heading into that generation. We are already heading into that future. And open governance, data-driven decisions, data-driven processes are things that we need to embrace. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I noticed that this report talks about an event that is clearly way in the past. If this is what happened in the Republic of Georgia, then this was on 17th and 19th of July 2018. It's about 1 year ago. And I've previously talked about reports on committee visits, whether they need to come to this House for debate. Mr. Speaker, I've seen in other parliaments, what happens is that when a committee does a foreign visit, it will bring a report, but that report will be served to the House in the form of a statement, so that the order paper is not clogged with too many reports of committees. Even though I also appreciate that the fact that a committee can bring such a detailed report is part of accountability. It confirms to the public that the resources that were spent by members of this Senate to go to overseas countries was properly utilized. And so we must find a middle ground of ensuring that we account whenever we travel outside, and on the other hand, ensuring that these reports do not block other legitimate business. I want to congratulate the team that went out and brought us back this detailed 32-page report. I also want to congratulate the members of staff who are usually very dedicated in making sure that these reports come back to the House. And I want to appeal that we find a framework also for implementation of some of these reports that come from foreign visits. Many a times we go out there, we make promises. The other day we went to Russia and we agreed we were going to form a Kenya-Russia parliamentary friendship group. And sometimes things get stuck at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or things get stuck here. So let us ensure that whatever commitments and resolutions and recommendations we make whenever we go for these foreign visits, they are things that make sense. Very finally, again, these foreign visits are a form of parliamentary diplomacy. As a Senate and as Parliament, I think we need to have some very in-depth review of our parliamentary diplomacy and whether it works. We have seen some very embarrassing situations whenever we travel, where what was supposed to be parliamentary diplomacy then ends up being something akin to parliamentary insult because of issues of cultural differences, issues of etiquette, or sometimes just a lack of understanding and poor preparedness on the part of the delegation coming from Parliament. But looking at this report, I'm convinced that the delegation was very well prepared, and that's why they've been able to bring back this very useful report. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Honorable Senators, since there are no more requests, I now proceed to put the question, but before I put the question, this matter that is raised by this motion does not affect counties. I therefore proceed to put the question that this House notes the reports of the Parliament of Kenya delegation on the Global Open Governance Partnership Summits held in Tbilisi, Georgia, from 17 to 19 July 2018, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, 20th February 2019, and in Ottawa, Canada, from 29th to 30th May 2019, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 11th July 2019. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honorable Senators, regarding the communication of the chair yesterday, on orders that are present on the order paper and members present, we warn members that we will defer today order number 9, order number 10, and this is the last time we are deferring these orders. So, next order.
Order number 11, motion, reports of the Parliament of Kenya delegation to the assemblies of the Interparliamentary Union, IPU, and related meetings.
Senator Susan Kihika.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I wish to move the following motion, that the Senate notes the reports of the Parliament of Kenya delegation to the 139th Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union, the IPU, and related meetings held in Geneva, Switzerland, from the 14th to the 18th October 2018, laid on the table of the Senate on Thursday, 6th December 2018. And the 140th Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union, IPU, and related meetings held in Doha, State of Qatar, from the 6th to the 10th of April 2019, laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 23rd July 2019. Mr. Speaker, sir, the IPU is one of the oldest world organizations. Indeed, actually, it's an organization that's older than the United Nations. And it's where the world parliaments, actually about its membership is 178 world parliaments, where the members of parliament come together so that they can dialogue, they can cooperate, and as well as just exchange best practices, talk to each other, and at the end of the day, come up with some action to bring to back to their individual parliaments to adopt, so that as a world we can move together as parliamentarians and also know what's going on across the world and what the voices of the other parliaments can do to help those that need help at some point or other. Mr. Speaker, sir, the 139th IPU Assembly, which was in Geneva, Switzerland, the Speaker of the Senate was the chair of the delegation, and it included members of both the National Assembly as well as the Senate. And in the days that the Assembly happened, which was the 14th to the 18th of October, quite a bit was discussed, quite a bit was on the table. The way the IPU Assembly works, Mr. Speaker, sir, is it has standing committees, just like we have here in the House. And so given those committees, then substantive issues are discussed at those standing committees. And as a delegation, the Kenyan delegation participated in all the standing committees, one of them being the Peace and International Security, where the members were able to have to participate in panels on comprehensive disarmament and non-proliferation and of arms. And that is an important issue in the world, and that's why I'm talking about IPU really does deal with real-time issues that are going on around the world. And as Parliament, we are able to come up either with legislations that sort of slow these sort of problems or issues around the world, or at least be able, at a minimum, maybe to have persuade those involved to sort of either cut back or in some cases, just not continue to have, to not continue with the, with the problem, to send delegations to speak with those countries so that the situations can be curbed. There was also a lot of discussions, and there was a panel on combating sexual violence in US peacekeeping operations and beyond, which had also become a problem in some of the countries around the world where maybe wars were happening and sexual violence then, or there was instability and sexual violence was a big issue, so that the international community had to be involved to get this stopped, since maybe the governments were unwilling or just not willing to stop those issues on their people. And so as a world community, then it becomes necessary to sort of raise our voices so that we are able to put pressure on those governments to stop these bad practices. There was also the Standing Committee on Sustainable Development, Finance and Trade, and part of the delegation also participated in that, meaning part of the Kenyan delegation, because it was quite about 10 members of parliament, both the National Assembly as well as the Senate, and as I said, then they would split between the different committees and were able to sort of give very substantive contributions to the standing committees. And on this committee, the panel was on the role of fair and free trade and investment in achieving the SDGs, especially those regarding economic equality, sustainable infrastructure, industrialization, and innovation. And obviously, as we know, as one of the big four agenda that we have as the agenda of the Jubilee government, one of that really is industrialization. And so some of these panels were able to sort of give best practices of what other countries are really able to do in being able to have economic growth and sustainable infrastructure, while at the same time being able to promote and build on innovation, use that to also create industries so that they are able to achieve or create jobs for their people, and more so actually in the perspective of using innovation to do that. And that just brings me back to what was being discussed in this Senate earlier today, where we need to be more innovative in order to create more jobs for our youths in this country, given the high number of unemployment in the country. When we also talk about sustainable infrastructure, I know that's also a very live issue here with the infrastructure that we've seen going on around the country, and maybe the debate on borrowing and whether it is important to borrow, because we must have infrastructure that then helps build our economy, but at what point is it, are we able to sustain it, or is the cost too much? And do we just continue borrowing so that we can continue building on this infrastructure? But once again, I mean, a country does need infrastructure in order for it to grow, and it is, and so we are able to kind of look at that and sort of determine at what point do we just continue borrowing? Rather, do we just continue opening up our country, which is necessary, so that then we are able to get the industrialization that we are talking about, to get people from one area to the other, but how do we make it sustainable? So those were some of the big issues that came up out there. There is also the issue of the UN, or the issue of climate change, which is a huge deal in the world right now. And for the last few years, it's been a big deal, and that was discussed substantially on what it is as a world that we can do to sort of address the climate change issue, which is a big problem in this, and it's all over the world anyway. So for us, maybe we may not be dealing with it as much as other countries are dealing with it, maybe because our needs right now, we may not be able to see climate change as one of the more important, immediate crisis that we have when we are really talking about putting food on the table and that sort of stuff. But it does not stop that from being a discussion at the world stage in almost any of the panels that were held during the IPU meetings. There was also the Standing Committee on Democracy and Human Rights, which is really an important committee. And one of the bigger things that IPU really deals with is also making sure that it helps defend democracy around the world, promote as well as defend. And this is really central and key to IPU. So this was one of the committees where our members participated, and the major topic was on strengthening interparliamentary cooperation on migration and migration governance in view of the adoption of the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. Now, we all know that around the world, international migration is a big deal. It's a big issue given the conflicts that are going on all over the parts of the world. And in fact, the UN estimated that, and this was 2013, so that's pretty old in terms of numbers, but just shows you what kind of numbers we are talking about. There are about 232 million people who are living outside of their countries of birth or citizenship for more than 1 year due to these sorts of crises. And the discussion really ranged on the causes of this international migration, and obviously it comes down to economic, political, and social factors. And we, as a country, we know a lot about this migration because we've had a lot of refugees as well in our country. And I do recall that our distinguished Senator, Dr. Agnes Zani, was able to do a presentation on that, or participate actually in a panel regarding that. And that in 2018, just a quick number, throwing a quick number out there, Kenya was host to up to 486,000 refugees and asylum seekers at Kakuma and Dadaab refugee camps. So clearly, it's one of the problems. It's a big problem around the world, but it's also a problem that really affects Kenya. And also, when we talk about the refugees, not just in terms of opening up our country to the refugees, but also making sure that they are taken care of, even as they settle or as they are in the camps waiting to be settled or moved to other countries or whatever, that making sure that their rights are protected, that if it's children, for example, they are able to access schools. If they are sick, they are able to get medical help and that sort of stuff. And that's just what is expected of any country that hosts these refugees or asylum seekers. So we also obviously acknowledged how much of an impact migration has, or even these refugees and asylum seekers have on women and children, and therefore also the bigger need to make sure that their rights are protected as migrants in whichever country that they are. So that was that was a general overview of the 139th Assembly that was in Geneva in October of 2018. There was also the parity debate on ensuring that children enjoy their rights and grow up protected from violence. And this was an issue just because in some of these countries, especially some of the war-torn countries or very unstable countries, we've seen where children, the rights of children, the children are not able to enjoy their rights. And sometimes, a lot of times actually, there is a lot of violence meted on these children. And in addition to that, even the children being used as child soldiers and that sort of bad stuff. So the issue was really how to make sure that in our individual countries that our children are able to grow up in an environment that's free from violence. Also, at the tail end of the conference, there was a workshop on how a good parliament is able to hold the government into account. And I know as a parliament, as our own parliament here, it's one of the things that we really struggle with sometimes, because we know one of our key roles is to hold the government accountable, but sometimes it seems we are pulled in so many directions that sometimes falls through the cracks. So it was an awakening call of really what our roles are as parliaments. It seemed that most parliaments across the world obviously seem to face the same challenges when it comes to holding the governments accountable. And I don't need to spell that out as we've lived that. Sometimes it becomes difficult. And it was also obvious that it varies depending maybe on the dynamics of individual countries. But it was a session where we deliberated a lot on coming up with ways of making sure that as parliamentarians, we are able to hold our governments accountable regardless of what our situations are, be they party loyalties or whatever the issues may be, that we may not lose sight of that as a primary role of parliamentarians. Now, there was also the 140th Assembly, which was in Doha on the 6th to the 10th of April 2019, and I do agree a bit with my chair here of PAC, the great senator from Homa Bay, that maybe our reports have been a bit delayed as far as tabling them and bringing the motions. But we've tried to be as comprehensive as we can, but I think, as you said, it's probably we would do better to be more timely, so I acknowledge that. So on this assembly, which was in April in Doha, like I said, the same setup, just a different assembly, and on this assembly, the general debate was really on platforms to enhance education for peace, security, and the rule of law. And, you know, we all are aware that without good education, without having that platform for education within our countries, it will not be easy to enhance the rule of law. Or also that education also helps towards peace and security. It goes a long way, because when we are exposed, when we are socialized a bit differently, then maybe we are able to see the world for what it should be and to get away from violence, because then our mindsets are a little bit more open, and that helps in keeping our country stable as well as having peace. So the same thing again, it was the same, the committees, the standing committees again on peace and security, but with different topics on this assembly, for this assembly. And the same thing again, it was, the delegation was made up of the Senate as well as the National Assembly, and again led by our Speaker, the Right Honorable Speaker Kenneth Lusaka. And I also, when I think about Qatar, I also think about what I think one of the senators talked about in a previous motion, the one before this one, about being able to follow up on what it is that we talk about out there in these international conferences or summits or whatever they may be, or assemblies. Because in this one of Qatar, I do recall that as a delegation, we also began a process of having a friendship group between the parliamentarians of Kenya as well as those of Qatar, and talked a lot about our common areas of interest and where we can be of value to each other, vice versa, in both ways. But it still has not come to be, and sometimes I believe the red tape may be a bit too much. So we do have to do something about that so that we can make sure that when we are done with these debates and come back home, that we are able to follow up on promises made, and also able to come up with ways of entrenching these, whether they be caucuses or whatever they would be, so that we are able to harness those relationships and get an advantage or benefits out of those relationships for our people. Yes, so Mr. Speaker, sir. The Kenya Parliament delegation to both the 139th and the 140th Interparliamentary Union, IPU Assembly, and related meetings. Pursuant to Article 7 of the IPU statutes, urges the two houses of parliament to note this report, and one, to note this report, and two, follow up on the implementation of the declaration and resolutions of the 140th IPU Assembly and related meetings. So in that 140th Assembly meeting, there were some declarations that the parliamentarians agreed to, that we are to bring back to our own individual parliaments, so that they can go a long way if the individual parliaments are able to implement the declarations as well as the resolutions. They are included in the reports, but I'll very briefly outline them. One was, first of all, there was a concern on the communities about the impact of globalization in terms of workforce displacement and other harmful distortionary effects. They reaffirmed, or the parliamentarians reaffirmed, the vital importance of the rules-based, transparent, equitable, and non-discriminatory multilateral approach to trade and investment. So this is centered on the WTO and arbitration mechanisms. Okay. Two, to reaffirm the contribution that fair, free, and sustainable trade and properly regulated foreign investments can lead to reducing poverty, inequality, instability, and conflict in our different countries. It also underlined the importance of integrating sustainable consumption and production into trade and investment, legal frameworks, policies, and regulations. Now, what actually also comes to my mind as I'm quickly pointing that out is there was a panel discussion on safety, on food safety in our different countries. And when I talk about that, I do recall that a few days ago, actually, here in our own country, we've seen the things like flour being recalled. We've before heard of other food substances maybe not being safe for consumption. So that was one of the issues that was dealt with at the assembly, where it's important that as countries we are able to, it is important that we are able to protect our citizens by making sure that there is some regulated standards in the foods that are sold in our markets. Obviously, we don't want to be so specific that different countries that we have a uniform sort of laws, but I think it now makes it very important in our country to have that sort of law, because we seem to be really at the mercy of various cartels in different fields, be they in maize, as we are hearing about the unga, the ugali flour, which we know a lot of our people depend on. Sometimes we've heard that our vegetables are grown on sewages, which I'm not necessarily sure that I don't have the evidence for that, but I'm sure we've all read that in the social media, which makes it extremely scary. But also as a parliament, we can't also just sit back and fold our hands. I'm sure that the issue has been forwarded. I heard that a couple of days ago here on the floor of the Senate. The issue has been forwarded to the Agriculture Committee, and I look forward to seeing what it is that they'll come up with, so that one, be it KEBS, be it any of the other institutions, they regulate really what gets on the cabinets in our houses, so that we are not having products that have cancer-causing carcinogens without any sort of regulations. So I think it's been a very free-for-all market, and it's time to regulate that. And I bring that up because that was one of the discussions. Actually, one of our members of parliament was in that panel. That was one of the discussions at that IPU assembly. As we move forward, we must have a healthier world. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move, and I wish to request Senator Halake Abshiro to second. Thank you.
Senator Abshiro Halake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to second the motion on the report of the 140th Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union, IPU, and related meetings held in Doha, State of Qatar. Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate, first of all, Senator Kihika for this report, not so much as a participant, but Mr. Speaker, the IPU is a very special organization to this country. We, as Kenya, hold the presidency of the Bureau of on the forum of the Bureau of Women Parliamentarians, because our own Senator Kihika is actually the president of the forum of the Bureau of Women Parliamentarians in IPU. So Kenya is very invested in this, actually, but that aside, this forum is one of the most important forums in the calendar of Parliament, I believe, because 179 member parliaments are members of this forum. And what that means is that 179 country parliaments, people with the powers to make laws, to legislate, to make decisions that can affect their citizens in various very strategic areas, come together under one roof during this assembly, Mr. Speaker. So this assembly and this IPU forum is one very important calendar event which happens twice a year, and it's important that we as Kenya take it very seriously, and I'm glad that very serious parliamentarians went there. The list is as read out by Senator Kihika, and very strategic areas, very important areas were discussed. And these areas are not just globally significant, but very significant even for our own countries, for our own country. In the case of the 140th Interparliamentary Union Assembly, The theme was Parliament as a platform to enhance education for peace, security, and the rule of law. I think this is a very important theme because it's through education that we can achieve anything, be it peace, be it security, be it socioeconomic status, be it, name it. And it's a very important rights issue for education, peace, and rule of law to be upheld. So I think this was very timely. But what was very important also is that we have a very comprehensive report here. I think 72 pages of in-depth analysis of what happened at the Assembly, in-depth capturing of the resolutions of the Assembly, in-depth contributions even by our own members of Parliament. The ear and the eyes of the leadership of our Parliament, and will definitely be implemented, given that they are part of the people that generated and therefore own these resolutions, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, looking at this report, I can't help but be impressed that every area, first of all, in terms of the content, from the areas of climate change, as enumerated by Senator Kihika, which is, of course, a global issue and a global challenge. In fact, we as Africans should be at the forefront of climate advocacy and climate lobby, because even though we may not be the people that have contributed to the global warming, we are suffering the effects of it perhaps much more than anybody else in this world, Mr. Speaker, especially coming from northern Kenya myself, and coming from a cycle of floods and a cycle of drought every year, whereby even our rangelands are not generating any grass at all. And we can squarely put this on the effects of global climate change, and the fact that really the effects, even though we may not have been the number one, in terms of cause of the global warming, we as Africans and as Kenyans, especially from where I come, are seeing very, very dramatic departure from the climate that we knew before. So as much as climate change may look like something that is much more global and therefore may not be very touching us very directly, in terms of the impact, it's important that we were on the table and that our legislators were on the table at this important forum where climate issues, climate challenges, climate resolutions, and climate discussions were taking place. In terms of security, in terms of migration, in terms of the rights issues to education, in terms of humanitarian law, in terms of humanitarian emergencies, all this which affect us disproportionately as perhaps as people that live in this country, were discussed. And I pray and hope, having the presidency, especially for the Women Bureau, Forum of the Bureau of Women Parliamentarians, we have the favor and the goodwill and the political will to implement a lot of the resolutions, especially as affects us, as affects women, as affects children, as affects education, as affects our humanitarian, our humanitarian needs as a result of perhaps the climate and other causations. Madam Speaker, again, what was also quite impressive is the in-depth analysis of the related meetings. There was women's meeting, there was women's forum, where women's issues were canvassed and women's issues were actually brought to the fore. There was youth forum, where youth issues were again canvassed very well and brought to the fore. And again, my hope and prayer is that these good ideas and these very good resolutions will be implemented, and I have every faith, given the high-level delegation and given our own seat at the helm of the forum, at least for the Women Bureau. I know that these are some of the things that will Senator Susan and the team and ourselves will support to ensure that these resolutions see light of day and are implemented, because usually we as Kenyans are very good at analysis, very good at strategic documents, very good at documentation, but the implementation sometimes falls short. But in this case, my prayer and hope is that, given the fact that the people that hold the resources, the people that hold the decisions were at the table and are driving, and at the leadership and the helm of the IPU, we are then favored and are very hopeful that these resolutions will definitely be implemented. Mr. Speaker, we also have seen the issues of the Sustainable Development Goals, and in fact, as I was reading this, I was seeing that the SDGs are cutting across a lot of the resolutions, especially with regards to the investment and international trade resolution. And so again, I'm happy to have seen, in fact, I think I was having a bit of a background in international trade. I was trying to look for areas that perhaps we may want to improve, but I'm glad that a lot of the international trade issues as regards sustainability, and also as regards rules and free trade, principles have been taken care of, and now then the work is upon us to ensure that we follow up on the resolutions and implement them. Mr. Speaker, one of the key issues of the resolutions that perhaps was very important was the issue on education, where enabling equitable access to education for all was recognized, and access to education as limited by and the barriers to the significant disparities in education were also identified, and where adoption of national legislation that guarantees education as a universal right was discussed, and perhaps where then legislation is lacking, or where then there's gaps in this legislation, we as parliament have now the opportunity to then ensure that we legislate for this, and also make sure that our policies are robust and adequate to ensure that particular right for our children is guaranteed. Also, I think ensuring that by 2030, all children and adolescents complete a full cycle of early childhood development, primary and secondary education in line with SDG 4 and Target 4.1 is very important, especially for the Senate, given that early childhood education is a devolved function, and therefore it's an area for this for Senate to really keep an eye on and ensure our counties are able then to fulfill this resolution, and perhaps hopefully by 2030 all our children, especially the early childhood education and SDG 4 is met. Now again, the issues around educational facilities. Mr. Speaker, as you know, you and I come from Northern Kenya. Facilities don't exist. Infrastructure for education is almost non-existent. Our kids go to school under trees, and therefore we hope, at least from where we sit, as legislators, as decision makers, as policy makers, we ensure that education infrastructure is put in place so that our children who are learning under trees in Northern Kenya are able to compete. Right now we have exams going on. We have kids doing experiments in biology, experiments in chemistry, and using labs. But I shudder to think what infrastructure exists, especially in the parts of the world you and I come from, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we see light of day with regards to our kids being able then to compete on level ground. The resolution on the non-admissibility of using mercenaries and foreign fighters as a means of undermining peace, international security, and territorial integrity of states and without violating human rights. I don't want to go into it, but again, important issues internationally and even in our own country, as the world has become a very unstable place where wars are strife, and we need to make sure that there are rules around engagements in war. Resolutions on the role of fair trade. Again, as I said, I'm glad this, especially with regards to sustainability and with regards to fair trade in regards to rules that are fair even to third world countries or to developing countries, so to speak, were canvassed and also resolutions made around that. We will be watching out for the implementation of these resolutions as parliamentarians and making sure that our own local investments adhere to these standards. A resolution on a call for urgent international action to support Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe hit by cyclone. Again, a humanitarian response, and therefore, but again, these cyclones are more frequent and perhaps may have a direct link to the climate issues that were canvassed. And it's our hope that then all these good things are implemented. And with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, sir, I second the report of the 140th Assembly of the International Parliamentary Union and related meetings. I thank you.
Honorable Senators, I propose the question, which is that the Senate notes the report of the Parliament of Kenya delegation to 139th Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union and related meetings held in Geneva, Switzerland from 14 to 18 October 2018, laid on the table of the Senate on Thursday, 6th December 2018, and on the 140th Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union and related meetings held in Doha, State of Qatar, from 6th to 10th April 2019, laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 23rd July 2019. Senator Moses Kajwang.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the motion on the report of the Parliament of Kenya delegation to the Interparliamentary Union and related meetings. Mr. Speaker, allow me, because I've not taken the opportunity before, even though my colleagues in the Senate have done so, allow me to take this opportunity to congratulate Senator Susan Kihika on her election to be the president of the Bureau of the Forum of Women. And I do hope that the people of Nakuru understand the importance of this particular position. And not just the people of Nakuru, the women of Kenya, and not just the women of Kenya, the people of Kenya. That this is an extremely influential and important role that Senator Kihika is performing on behalf of the people of Kenya. And I hope that our electorate would understand that those weekends when she's not able to join in the funerals and weddings and fundraisers and the church meetings, she's discharging a mandate that is much bigger than Nakuru, much bigger than Kenya, much bigger than Africa. Mr. Speaker, being president of the Bureau, which brings together 179 member states, is no mean task. And doing so in an organization that is 130 years old makes it even much more of a rare opportunity. I therefore congratulate her. I also want to take this opportunity to congratulate my friend and my running mate, Honorable Patrick Mariro, who was also appointed the third co-rapporteur in the Standing Committee on Sustainable Development, Finance and Trade. And it appears there's something about these people who love running, because Maureen Osoru, a young member of parliament from Uganda, is also the president of the board of the Forum of Young Parliamentarians. And I've seen in the report that she was chairing a forum of young parliamentarians of the IPU. I've met Maureen Osoru several times whenever we go for the East Africa Legislative Assembly Games. Indeed, in the last East Africa Legislative Assembly Games, in the 100-meter race, the race was between Maureen Osoru and Senator, the senator from our side, the youngest senator, Senator Mercy Chebeni. Mr. Speaker, I beg your indulgence. Senator Mercy Chebeni and Maureen Osoru. And Maureen Osoru, to be honest, won that race. It's only that she started off before everyone else. She had a false start, but she had a good run. Unfortunately, she injured herself in the process. And then they had to go for the second round. And the second round, Senator Mercy Chebeni took gold in the 100 meters. So I want to congratulate her on being elected the president of the board of Forum of Young Parliamentarians. I hope no one will ask why I know so much about Maureen Osoru. All we share is a love for athletics and we go for EALA games to deepen and widen integration. Mr. Speaker, the delegation that went for this meeting was 19 members strong, led by the Speaker of the House, who's also an executive committee member. And I believe that Kenya has a very enviable position within the IPU. I'd said it earlier, that these are forms of parliamentary diplomacy. And it appears that parliamentary diplomacy does not have a place in the strategy and policy of the people sitting at Harambee House. I'm assuming that's where the Minister for Foreign Affairs sits. Because sometimes when we visit and when we go into these global events, where we are sitting together with people from 178 other countries, we are there representing Kenya. We are not representing ourselves. But sometimes the manner in which parliamentary delegations to these very important events are treated leaves a lot to be desired. You will find sometimes even the Speaker of the House arrives in a foreign country and has to organize Ubers to take him into meetings. You'll find honorable members representing the country, getting into those countries, and even our ambassadors are nowhere to be seen. You will find the itinerary of parliamentarians during these events will be managed exclusively by Parliament without any interface with the persons who represent our countries in the embassies in those countries. There is need to marry parliamentary diplomacy, trade diplomacy, political diplomacy, and the other branches of diplomacy in this country so that we can have a coherent approach of representation. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, members of Parliament do so much more in representing this country in various bodies, be it the Interparliamentary Union, be it the Commonwealth Parliamentarians Association, be it the other bodies that members of this parliament subscribe to. And so this then would be a challenge that goes to the Defense, Security and Foreign Affairs Committee. Many a times when I'm having lemonade with members of the National Assembly, they ask, why should the Senate have a defense committee? Because they are convinced that defense is a national government function. And I've told them not to look at the description of the committee. This committee does a lot of things. When Senator Susan Kihika, as president of the Bureau of the Forum of Women Parliamentarians, goes out there to do whatever she's doing, it's part of diplomacy, which then would fit neatly within the mandate of that committee that we call Defense, Security and Foreign Affairs. And I hope that they will be picking some of these reports and look at the resolutions coming out of them and help to influence Kenya's diplomacy, policy and strategy and practices to ensure that the good work of Senator Kihika, the good work of Patrick Mariro, the good work of Professor Oduol in the National Assembly, and many others who hold leadership positions in some of these international organizations, that good work is harnessed, it is tapped to contribute to Kenya's prosperity out there. Mr. Speaker, right now Kenya is angling for a seat at the United Nations General Assembly. And I'm impressed with the approach that Kenya has taken by not projecting politicians as the face of the campaign, but by using our successful athletes, sportsmen, and people who have performed very well in the arts and in the intelligentsia as the face of Kenya. I think that is laudable, but all these need to be integrated. When members of parliament go to an international forum, it must then be part of the agenda that once you're done with your presentation, the last agenda would be to make an appeal on behalf of Kenya for that seat at the United Nations General Assembly. If you do not involve us, and yet every other day members of parliament are going into these global bodies and global meetings, we will have missed an opportunity. Let us not go to Geneva just to attend a parliamentary meeting. Let us go there to do the business of parliament, but also to do the business of the Republic of Kenya in terms of convincing the other countries and delegations to look at Kenya favorably. And I believe that Senator Kihika, in her position, can do a very excellent job in that campaign for Kenya's position in the UN General Assembly, because she's in a position where she interacts with 179 member states, and that would be a very influential position. I hope the diplomats sitting in that house on Harambee Avenue will listen and will come into this house and tap into the competencies of this house. Mr. Speaker, the IPU is a focal point for worldwide parliamentary dialogue. It is 130 years old. And the question would be its continuing relevance in today's world. In 1889, when the IPU was established, there were many forces that are alien today. We had forces of colonialism. We still had remnants of slavery. We had the civil rights movement in the United States. It had not even been born. There was still apartheid down in South Africa. The world had not even gotten into the world wars. So the IPU was established at a time that was completely different from today. 130 years down the line, has the IPU been able to transform itself to respond to global realities? The wars of the 1889s, the wars of the 1900s, and the wars of the 1940s are not what define the world today. We have new threats, and I'm happy that during this particular meeting, the Congress or the convention discussed some of these new emerging threats. Yesterday, we went to Strathmore University to attend the Tolberg Foundation Conference, which was convened by the Tolberg Foundation, Strathmore University, and the Senate. And Mr. Speaker, I want to report to you that the professors and the intellectual community at Strathmore were extremely impressed that members of the Senate had the humility to go and sit with them on a round table to discuss contemporary issues. And I told them that in the Senate, we suffer no crisis of confidence. If you call us for a round table discussion, we shall appear. They said that the other house has never made an appearance, and I told them that they need to manage their confidence issues. But we had a discussion on the relevance of regional organizations or cooperative organizations like the IPU in the age of Brexit, in the age of Donald Trump, and what we call Trumpism and rising nationalism. Mr. Speaker, you have seen the United Kingdom is withdrawing from the European Union. They are pulling their representatives from the European Parliament. But we are still sending our representatives to the East Africa Legislative Assembly, to the Pan-African Parliament, to the IPU, and to the other cooperative legislative arrangements. We seem to be going against the tide. The tide is that of rising nationalism, but we seem to be converging even much more. I want to give certain proposals to President Kihika, and I believe that's a rightful title, because within the IPU she's called President. Thank God it was not, the title is not Governor, otherwise you'd have been in serious problems when you go back to Kaptembwa. The IPU must embrace technology. Technology is now a disruptor. In 1889, you could only do a meeting by all sitting in one hall. Today, I saw the Secretary General of the United Nations address the conference via video link. Why can't we develop this parliament to get it to a level where we don't have to troop 19 people to Qatar to attend a meeting? We can sit here in this chamber and debate, and there is a video camera that then connects us to the rest of the 179 member states. So please, we need to embrace that. But we also need to be aware of the disruptive effect of technology. Those relationships and objectives that you had in 1889 will definitely change. More importantly, how does the IPU resonate with the youth? Do they feel it and do they know it? Must you be a member of parliament to know the IPU? You need to get the activities of the IPU outside the chambers of parliament and make it relevant to the needs of the people. How do we deal with issues of nationalism? How do we ensure that democracy, which is one of the goals and ideals of the IPU, is enforced and observed by member states? Because at the end of the day, I'm sure you don't care how people are elected. Once they are elected and they become members of parliament, then they can subscribe to IPU. Could there be minimum standards that member states must subscribe to? Or you have taken a policy of see no evil, hear no evil, say no evil. I believe that if IPU is going to look at democracy as one of the focal points, representative democracy, then it needs to do something about it. Immigration. Mr. Speaker, it is an embarrassment that Eritreans would struggle to go into another country, that South Sudanese would struggle to go into another African country, that Libyans would struggle, would feel that they're being offered a favor to go to Rwanda. We must have a conversation around immigration. I am convinced, the way Peter Tosh once sang, that no matter where you come from, as long as you're a black man, you are an African. we must dismantle these artificial borders and these artificial immigration policies. And IPU should be at the forefront. By bringing together 179 states, you must also be advocating for the eradication and elimination of borders and artificial immigration policies that separate us instead of bringing us together. Finally, peace and security must be a focus for the IPU. There are member states, the 179, some of which are embroiled in war. How will you partner with the United Nations and other regional bodies to ensure that the guns are silenced? These are some of the things which, if you put on the agenda, would form part of the reform proposals for the IPU. And I want to encourage you, the same way President Kagame, when he was president of the Africa Union in 2018, he came up with a reform agenda. I would be extremely pleased and proud if President Susan Kihika would influence the IPU to come up with a reform agenda that would clearly ensure that the IPU lives beyond its 130th anniversary and goes into the future with a clear mandate, with a lean structure, and with an actionable work plan that will remove the IPU from the chambers of parliament and take it to the people where parliaments really derive their mandate. Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, I support.
I call upon the mover, Senator Kika, to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let me first appreciate the very great contributions that the senators, Senator Abshiro and Senator Kajwang, have brought forth. The points are well taken and noted, and going forward, they can only add to the value that we bring to the table. Senator Kajwang, you've talked a bit about technology, and I just wanted to bring to your attention that even as we just saw, you are absolutely right. That is the direction that the world is heading, and IPU has not been left behind. Just to let you know, when we were in Qatar, I believe there are some countries that do not have very good relations with Qatar. And what the members actually did was give their contributions on video links, video calling and all that. So that is one of the things that I've seen happen. We also sometimes always will have the Secretary General of the United Nations also do the same thing. So that's something that has been happening. But beyond that, I like what you're saying. Instead of, as a country, especially sometimes when we are facing these financial issues or austerity, need to have more austerity measures, instead of taking such a big delegation or a big delegation, but still wanting to add value to the meetings, it would be a great idea to make sure that we use technology more and can even call in from Kenya and give our contributions. I think that would also be really, really great. Now, you talked a bit about whether there is a baseline or a minimum as far as when members are being elected, and once they're in parliament, then they can just go to IPU. There really is not, but that's something to really think about. But what I've seen now in another way towards that is we have become, or we are one of the organizations that's extremely gender sensitive. That is really one of the big deals. And what we are doing is when the countries register their delegations, if they are not gender compliant, then we don't accept, when they come, they're sort of penalized in the sense that when during the General Assembly there is a vote taken, they don't get, their power is diluted because they don't have a gender-sensitive delegation. So that's one of the things I think we can, like we were talking about, sort of forcing parliaments to be cognizant of. because as we speak, I mean, women are just as many as the men, and the census just came out. I think the women are about 51%. So there is no reason why we can't have more women at the table. So we are working extremely, extremely hard to do that. And as the president of the Bureau of Women Parliamentarians, that's really one of my big, big, big things. As far as the youth, you are very right, actually. By the way, IPU is one of the first places that I went to and discovered that youth means up to 45. So for the first time, we were all youth. But we are also working with parliaments to put in place laws, because there are some places, there are some parliaments where, or rather, there are some countries where you cannot run for office, even for a member of parliament, unless, say, you're 30 years old. I know Nigeria had that, but they did away with that. So we are working with parliaments that have those sorts of limitations to take those out and just leave it to 18, so that even younger and younger members are able to represent. Because as we know, like, for example, here in Kenya, the youth is 66% going by the just recently released census. So we are disenfranchising, we would be disenfranchising them if we required that only above 35 would run. Granted, we don't have those sorts of laws in our country. The youth are able to run. So those are some of the things that we are trying to do so that we can enhance democracy across the world. Now, there's also the issue of, when we talk about human rights, actually, I just wanted to point out that for your information and for all the other parliamentarians. We also work with human rights for parliamentarians. We are not just talking about human rights for the citizens of a country, but for parliamentarians, where we've even had to do, I previously, actually just a few months ago, went to Washington, D.C., to the US Congress, where we were able to present cases for some parliamentarians in some countries in the world where maybe you've been put on house arrest, so you cannot go to parliament, or some trumped-up charges have been brought against you, and you are not able to come into parliament because now you are detained, or whatever it is, whatever the issue may be. So really, when we talk about that, we talk about really protecting our parliamentarians so that they are able to dispense their mandate. Senator Abshiro Halake, you did very well in pointing out on the 140th Assembly on the education issues. Education is really just, it's a right across the world. It's a universal, it should not be, we should not have a world where anybody is unable to access education. So that's one of the places I would say as Kenya, we've really done quite well by just beginning with having free primary education. You'll be surprised when you sit there with 178 other parliamentarians and realize in some things we are really doing well. And I think yesterday I also attended, is it the Tallberg dinner in the evening? And as speaker after speaker spoke, many of them were not even from the African continent, and some were from the African continent, but continuously praised Kenya. So sometimes I've often wondered, we don't seem to really appreciate what a beautiful country we have. And when Senator Kajwang, you talk about parliamentary diplomacy, I think that is one of the things we, especially at the IPU, I would say at the IPU, we seem to be doing quite well, because when you walk into a lot of those panels, you will find the members of the Kenya delegation, the members of parliament, be it the National Assembly or the Senate, you'll find the members sitting and giving very, very, very substantive engagements. And as you said, we have been able to hold good positions because we've put ourselves forward. I would say, for example, myself, I had to first be elected by the African geopolitical group. So from east and west, south and north, and it's very political because sometimes it becomes the politics of the west versus the east, or the French-speaking versus the, all that sort of mix. And then from there to go get elected by the women at large, all the women parliamentarians, and then now as a committee to get elected by the committee as the president. So for them, they must think highly of Kenya for them to see that we are able and can do the task. We also had a similar election this last assembly, where Professor Jacqueline Aduol is now a vice chair of a committee on a high-level advisory committee on extremism and terrorism and extremism. As you said, Honorable Patrick Mariro is also a rapporteur. And actually, our minority whip, Senator Mutula has also previously in the IPU, I believe, have been a rapporteur. And so it's really doing well for putting out the name of Kenya out there. And as we continue, we will have also, because of the position, been able to, on the sidelines of, for example, the United Nations General Assembly, I'm able to chair women meetings. Or be they whatever high-level meetings we have been able to sort of bring forward and forth the name of our country and what we are doing. So you really, I cannot talk enough about how important that point you have made is on parliamentary diplomacy for putting our country out there on the map. Kenya is respected. I just wish as citizens we were more patriotic. I wish we knew more how beautiful and great of a country that we have. So in conclusion, I beg to...
What's it, Senator Kajwang?
Mr. Speaker, would it be in order for me to request that Senator Kihika confirms whether the 143rd Assembly shall indeed be held in Kenya and whether I am invited?
Senator Kihika.
Mr. Speaker, that was an issue that was raised, actually. Senator Kajwang, I see you are very, very well informed. In fact, that was an issue that was raised not in this last assembly, but the one before. And they were extremely interested in having Kenya host. However, right now, we have finances may be what makes us not be able to hold. So at this point, we are waiting on the PSC, and our commissioner is here. I hadn't even seen her. Honorable Senator Beth Mugo, who, by the way, I forgot to mention, she has done what I'm doing now a few years, let's just say a few years ago. So Senator Beth is one of the ladies that I really look up to, and I'm trying in my own little footsteps to follow her path. She did hold this position a few years ago, and when Kenya hosted IPU then, because Kenya did host, she was able to preside in those meetings. So yes, yes, please. How do we do that?
Senator Mugo, are you on a point of information?
Thank you, Sir Speaker. Yes, just to inform the Senator and Chair of a very important committee in IPU that I also presided over Committee 2, the big committee of 4 nations, for 4 years. And I was elected a second time. That time we were being elected by the whole world. And I was the second woman to hold that position since the formation. The first one was Helga of Finland in 1956. Also, Honorable Godana, the late, did hold a position in not quite the big 3 major committees, like the UN, they are the men on the UN, but a subcommittee, but also quite important. So Kenya has shown up there, and we are proud of you.
Thank you, Senator Beth, for that information. And really, that goes towards our point. I think we've been doing great as a country out there, but people don't seem to know that, or we are sort of not able to connect that or to weave that into getting us to the next level, like you were talking about getting that seat now. So as we move forward, we hope that at some point, I also would have wished that Kenya would be able to host that assembly next year, April, no, the year after, 2022 actually. 2021 or 2022? 2022. But at this point, we are waiting on the decision of the money people. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move. I thank all the senators for all those contributions. And we as a delegation, we also thank the Speaker of the Senate for helping us, facilitating this, as well as the Secretariat, because when we are out there, we are really well taken care of. I beg to move. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, this motion does not affect counties. I therefore proceed to put the question, which is that the Senate notes the reports of the Parliament of Kenya delegation to 139th Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union and related meetings held in Geneva, Switzerland from 14th to 18th October 2018, laid on the table of the Senate on Thursday, 6th December 2018, and on 140th Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union and related meetings held in Doha, State of Qatar from 6th to 10th April 2019, laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 23rd July 2019. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Will as many of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honorable Senators, I defer order number 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 as earlier directed by the Chair. Next order.
Order number 18, motion. Exercise by the Deputy County Governors of the powers and function vested in the office of the County Governor in the absence of the substantive holder of the office.
Honorable Senators, in line with the directive issued by the Chair on the orders in the order paper, and members who are sponsoring those orders are not present, I therefore defer order number 18 to next week. I defer putting the question. Honorable Senators, in the absence of the move of this motion, and in line with the direction as issued by the Chair, I therefore defer order number, putting question to order number 18 to next week. Next order. Okay. Honorable Senators, there being no other business, it's now time to adjourn the House. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until Tuesday, 19 November 2019 at 2:30 p.m.